If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People who've seriously encountered the most mysterious paranormal or supernatural things, or experienced something strange and scary. What's your story?
There are so many, but I'll tell you this one. I was expecting my friend, and as I walked through my living room, I glanced at the window and stopped dead in my tracks. There was a large, round, white, shimmering head peering back at me through the window under my short net curtains. The eyes were huge, black, sunken holes, and the mouth was very large, black, and gaping in a menacing laugh, taunting me. There was motion to it. Hideous. I watched it in horror for about 5 or 6 seconds. As I tried to gather my senses, I was trembling and my heart was hammering. All of a sudden I saw it morph into my friend's smiling face. What the? She was bending down, looking in, and telling me to open the door. I really didn't want to, but how could I not? My hands were shaking as I did so, putting on a huge fake smile to hide my fear and confusion, but I'm sure I dodged a hug. I think I was in too much shock to say anything to her there and then and tried to act normally, but I felt so awkward with her all afternoon. I couldn't get that demonic face out of my head. I did pluck up the courage to tell her some months later, and she just laughed it off and changed the subject. She must have thought I was a right nutcase. Lol. As you can imagine, the friendship dwindled soon afterwards. When I was a senior in high school, I and some friends from rugby decided to explore the local abandoned insane asylum nearby. We were in the wooded areas around Washington, D.C., and the complex itself was sprawling. We entered via the basement and got to exploring. We discovered padded rooms, strewn filing cabinets, and writings on the walls. Even an old abandoned piano in the dusty event hall. My friend Rob and I decided to head up a stairwell we found in the main hospital. The stairwell was extremely dark, and handprints covered the walls as we ascended. We went up about 5 stories as scared as 2 teenage dudes could be. We even held hands, it was that spooky. When we walked out of the 5th floor landing into the hallway itself, the floor was covered in paper. Standing in the middle of the hallway about 30 feet in front of us were 2 large, jet black Dobermans. They looked up at us in unison and just stared. My friend and I both asked each other if we were seeing this. I distinctly remember such an unsettling feeling about how the dogs stared, their size, and how both were such an identical jet black color. My friend and I both pretty much came to the verge of tears and booked it back down the steps. We returned to the group watery-eyed and with faces as white as sheets, and we all quickly left only to return in memory. My friend and I talk about it whenever we catch up from time to time. Devil dogs. There was a time when I didn't feel that good about myself anymore and wanted to disappear. The decision I made was that I would disappear as deep into the wilderness as possible to see what would happen. I wagered that I was 4 to 5 miles in when I stopped in a little area where the trees got slightly sparser. I looked up at a cliff face. I guess something subconsciously caught my eye. What do I see? I see a man in a suit standing near the edge of a cave. I know that probably isn't that strange, but hear me out. I was 4 to 5 miles into this forever hike. I looked like I had been hiking 4 to 5 miles. I looked homeless, I was dirty. I had nice boots on, but you couldn't tell because of all the dirt and grime. This ducking guy was in a business suit. He was clean, he had a briefcase and was adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He simply looked too clean to be out this far. If he had come into the forest the same way I did, then why did he look like he just came out of a store inside that cave? Why was he so clean? Fortunately, the guy didn't look over my way. I didn't want him to. The entire time there were alarm bells ringing in my head, and somewhere in the back of my brain, it was screaming that there was something wrong with this guy. That was the day I went back to my car and worked a little harder to get a roof over my head. I haven't been hiking since, even though I used to like it. My dad and I were hunting in the mountains north of Idaho City. It was about twilight, and we were hiking back to the car. We began to smell something terrible. The stench was as strong as burning bone and hair. It was the worst stench I've ever experienced. The smell got worse as we kept hiking. From behind us, we could hear what we believed to be someone or something running at a high speed. My dad grabbed me, held my face to his chest, and then dropped to the ground. I held tightly to him as the sound of running grew louder. Dad readied his rifle. I heard him say, "Oh no. Son, stand up. Walk with me. Look at the ground." Terrified, I stood. Stupid me turned around and looked. There were the remains of an elk. The head appeared to have undergone a blast furnace treatment. The hair on the body was all singed. The hooves looked melted. The running had ceased. We moved closer to the car. It was now nearly dark. About 100 yards from the car, we heard the running again, and we froze. All of a sudden the forest lit up like noonday. A loud whoosh swept past us. The forest was dark. It was quiet. Dead still. We booked it to the car. Threw our gear in the back seat and drove. I kept my head down and just cried. Dad was stoic and silent. Halfway out of the woods, we saw the light again. Bright as ever. But just for a second. And then it was gone again. I managed to return to Idaho City and made a stop at the Gold Mine Grill to regroup. I went inside, and there was another hunter in there. He looked at us and said, "Y'all see that shit?" He just stared and drank. Mysterious bright yellow light seen near a lake. I was walking home at night, and part of my route is near a lake where there are several joggers. It was around 9 p.m., and I saw this small, bright orange/yellow light about 50 feet away from me, and it was hovering maybe a foot off the ground. At first, I thought it was one of the lights that people put on children or dogs at night so that cars can see them. I tried to get closer but passed by a lamppost that obscured my view of the light for a brief moment, and after I passed it, the light was completely gone. It was too fast for a child or dog to have gotten out of the way, and it was completely silent. I was reading about will-o'-the-wisps to try to rule marsh gas out, but they're always described as faint blue lights, and this was not faint or blue, it was almost as bright as an LED. I don't usually believe in the paranormal, but this encounter was too weird for a logical explanation. I've had paranormal experiences my whole life. My brother, mother, and all three of my kids are like magnets for that stuff. My mother, brother, and stepfather lived in a very haunted house in Cape Breton, NS. In its prime, the house had been used as a place to hold wakes in the small community. One morning my mother got up and went into the kitchen. Every single drawer and cupboard was open, and the contents of the cupboards were stacked on the counters. The living room, where the bodies would have been during the wake, was so haunted my mother only used it for storage. The glass doors were always closed. Our dog wouldn't go near that room. Nothing could entice her. On a dare, I went into the room. My brother wanted to see how long I could last in there. Turns out, it wasn't long. The door slammed shut, and the knob was somehow stuck. There weren't any locks, and the doors were clear glass. That room made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It makes me feel queasy. In that same house, I heard furniture being dragged all night. I could hear footsteps, like someone wearing heels. Big, heavy footsteps, like a man. It kept me up all night. In the morning, I told my mother that my brother had kept me awake moving things around and wearing heavy boots in the house. As it turns out, he wasn't even home. My mother told me that she just learned to sleep through those noises. I've had so many experiences, but that house terrified me. Sarepta Springs, Arkansas. My friends and I used to go ghost hunting. Silly, I know. Well, online, I found this apparently haunted place called Sarepta Springs. I printed off the directions from MapQuest, and we went. Friends and cousins. It was a little turnoff from the side of the highway, you could barely see it. We had to turn around twice to find it, the dirt road was tiny and the trees and bushes damn near covered it completely. So, we turned in, drove down a little dirt road, there was a pavilion with pews, like church pews, and there was a stage and podium. That's what we initially saw. We all laughed and giggled, making fun, being silly, and trying to scare each other. Well, we turned around to head out because it wasn't really scary or fun, and there's a FKN cemetery fenced in that we didn't notice coming in. It only had a few graves, and the dates were late 1800s and early 1900s. Of course, we explored. We poked around, read the names on the graves, and started heading back to the car. Dude, I shit you not. I absolutely shit you not, from dead-ass silence. A baby started screaming. Just wah 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 wah. We all looked at each other in shock, like, are we all hearing this? Is this really happening right TF now? We hauled ducking ass to the car, all hopped in, and guess ducking what? The ducking car wouldn't start. Somehow the battery had died. I'd turn the key, and it would just make a clicking noise. The radio came on still, and I turned the music all the way up to drown out the baby crying noise. I waited a bit and turned the key, still nothing. Waited a bit longer, and finally the car started. I hauled ass out of there so freaking fast. That really happened. Sarepta Springs, Arkansas. Do not go there. A strange humanoid was sighted in rural Pike County, Indiana, between 2009 and 2010. Have you seen anything like this? Hey everyone, especially folks in or around Pike County, Indiana. Fair warning, I'm not sure if this would be Bigfoot related or not exactly, I'm more so investigating if it could be or not. Also, I don't usually share personal stuff, but I had an experience a while back that I haven't really been able to shake, and I'm wondering if anyone else has seen anything similar. Late one night, approximately 2009-10, on a rural road outside Pike County, Indiana, I saw something that doesn't match anything I've ever heard of. I wasn't alone, my cousins were with me, and they saw it too. It was a figure walking upright, on two legs, no doubt about that. It wasn't huge, probably about my height or a little shorter, but very skinny and completely pitch black. It appeared as though it was absorbing the surrounding light. But the part that stuck with me most was the eyes. They were glowing bright blue. Not reflected like animal eyes in headlights, these looked like they had their own light source. The eyes were a striking shade of icy blue. It didn't growl or make any sound. It didn't seem scared or aggressive. It just looked at us like it acknowledged us. Then they walked across the road and into the woods like we weren't even there. After a brief moment of silence, I asked, "Did you guys witness that?" And they both said yes. We left. I'm not claiming anything supernatural. But I lived in Pike County a long time, and I never saw anything like this, not a bear, not a bobcat, not anything local I could explain. And honestly, I've never heard anyone talk about bright blue eyes in anything like this. So I figured I'd ask, has anyone else around here or anywhere else ever seen anything like that? Just trying to see if this is a one-off or if there's more to this. Thanks for listening. I rarely mention this because it was so long ago and most people will think you're crazy, but it happened. I lived in a house right after my parents got divorced, with my mom, that was older but not super old. It was one of those main level houses that had an upstairs apartment, which is where I lived. When we first moved in, I would always hear someone walking up the stairs that led directly to my bedroom door late at night. I always assumed it was my mom coming to check and make sure my TV was off, blah blah. This went on for a few months until I, an angsty teen, decided to ask my mom why she felt the need to walk up every night to make sure I was asleep and that it was in fact just waking me up. My mother is a Southern belle through and through and has no reason to lie, especially about parenting. She told me she had never once done that. Mainly because she could see from the bottom of the stairs through the crack in the doors if my TV was on or not. This was WTF number 1. Pretty much immediately after that, I was home alone on a Saturday, sitting in the living room on the first floor. I heard a sound from upstairs that I can only describe as Lucifer himself clawing through the rafters. I immediately ran upstairs and saw that anything that was on a counter was on my floor. Almost all at once. From the CD player in my bedroom to the soaps in my shower, everything was on the ground. I was freaked TF out, so I called my dad to come pick me up and told him all about it when he did. Had to speak to the divorce counselor about this one so I knew no one was taking me seriously. Finally, as an avid Ghost Adventures fan, I took it upon myself to communicate with this thing. So, one night I waited until the witching hour and set up the Ghost Radar app on my iPod Touch and got to work. I was standing in the bathroom and simply said, "If you are here, make yourself known." Immediately, my toothbrush flew off the counter so fast it hit the wall behind me. I have never been able to explain this, but even typing this, I have chills going through my body. The house was a year-to-year rental, so we moved out a few weeks after this, and I didn't think about it much until a few years ago, when my sister and I started talking about how creepy that house was around my mom. She went on to explain to us that she fully agreed and would deter it when we were kids to quell our fears. She gave us full details of times she would wake up with a figure standing at the foot of her bed and her being paralyzed with fear. She even had an encounter where she was in her bathroom, watched her bedroom door open and shut, and saw a shadow stand in the corner until she closed her eyes. Ghosts are real, and if you are looking for a home in Indian Trail, North Carolina, I recommend avoiding the 3-bed, 3-bath in the Cascades. Mount Baldy mysterious sighting. Hi everyone. For many years, I've been trying to understand a very strange encounter I had on Mount Baldy in Southern California, and I'm hoping someone here might have some insights or even similar experiences to share, particularly if they also happened on Mount Baldy. This occurred around 2004, between approximately 9 p.m. and midnight. A friend and I had driven up Mount Baldy to enjoy the nighttime view of the city lights, which is quite spectacular from that vantage point. I was very familiar with the area, as Mount Baldy was one of my favorite places to hang out. We pulled over and parked in one of the safe viewing areas about halfway up the mountain. After getting out of the car, we stood there chatting and looking at the city lights below. About 15 minutes into our conversation, we began to hear a rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It sounded like extremely heavy and loud footsteps, and with each step, the ground beneath us vibrated noticeably. We both turned to see what it was, but there was nothing there. We didn't mention it to each other at the time and continued talking. About 30 seconds later, we heard the same heavy footsteps again, and the ground vibrated with each step. This time, we both turned and saw something that made no sense. Walking slowly in front of us was a small figure, probably less than 4 feet tall. It appeared to be naked and completely bald. What was so bizarre was that every single step it took was incredibly loud, and the ground shook visibly with each footfall. It also became eerily quiet, except for the sounds of the footsteps. I knew instantly that it wasn't human. Throughout the entire sighting, the figure stared straight ahead, never once looking in our direction. Both my friend and I were completely shocked. Just as we were trying to process what we were seeing, a truck drove by, and the strange figure disappeared behind a bush. My friend and I looked at each other, and without saying a word, we jumped back into our car and drove down the mountain as fast as we could. We didn't speak until we reached the city. I asked my friend if he had seen what I had, and he confirmed that he had been freaking out but tried to stay calm because I was driving. I'm really hoping someone might have an explanation for what we witnessed. I've had experiences with what I believe were ghosts or spirits before, but this felt entirely different. When I've tried to research unusual sightings on Mount Baldy, I've mostly come across numerous accounts of ghost sightings, which the area is apparently quite known for due to the many deaths and missing hikers. Has anyone else seen anything similar, especially on Mount Baldy? Any theories or shared experiences would be greatly appreciated, as I've been trying to make sense of this for years. Saw my cousin 8 years younger. This is the first paranormal and strange vision that I can recall from my childhood. I was about 6 years old, lying in bed ill from what was probably the flu. Because I was a spooked child, I always slept with my light on and with my bed set up so that I could open the bedroom door and see down the hall to my parents' room. Apparently, when I was a few years younger, I spent a lot of time running to their room, frightened of something in my bedroom, so my parents made sure I could see their room if I got spooked as a way of comforting me. That night my mom came into the room to check how hot my forehead was, tell me good night, and then turn the house lights off. She left my door cracked open and had dimmed my light. At one point I woke up that night to the sound of clinking glass. It wasn't really loud, but enough that I sat up to hear it better. The clinking stopped. I laid back down, and about a minute later it happened again. It kept clinking randomly, and I finally gathered the courage to open my door and look down the hall to see what it was. Even with all the house lights still off, I could see part of our kitchen past the hall. An outdoor street light helped illuminate it. Now my mom had this 2-piece green glass candy dish in the shape of a hen sitting on eggs. The candy dish was near the edge of our kitchen bar counter. When I opened the door to look, I could see my older cousin, who was about 12 at the time and did not live with us, and how he looked when he was 4 or 5 years old, based on photos. He was, and still is, short, and I could see him tiptoeing and reaching up to the counter trying to remove the glass hen to reach the candy. Because he was so short, he couldn't really grab onto the top of the glass, so it was constantly clinking as he reached, and it slipped out of his fingers. I closed my door enough so I couldn't see him anymore and began to cry out for my mom, and this was the first time I ever felt that fear where I was so scared that my voice froze up and nothing came out. What was odd about it was there was a very light glow to both the candy dish and my cousin. I jumped back in bed, and by that time the clinking stopped. The next day I told my mom, and she blamed it on the fever. While growing up she always tried to explain away strange events in that house. It never happened again with any of the fevers I had after that. What was strange is that I later learned that when my cousin was around the age I saw him as, he actually lived in that house when my grandmother owned it. I'm just curious if anyone has experienced anything like this. Other paranormal events in that house had an odd, childlike sense to them, so this was one of those events helped along by a fever. I met a ghost under the Golden Gate Bridge. I went to the North Tower with a date to watch the sunset. You can walk down an incline, and there are huge granite blocks left over from the bridge construction. You can watch the fog roll in and hear the foghorn's long, low notes. We were there until it got dark and then started walking back up to the car. I looked up, and there was a man sitting on top of one of the blocks. I said hello, and he nodded. He was wearing a plaid shirt, suspenders, wool pants, and old work boots. He was smoking a scruffy old pipe, and I could see the smoke curling up from it. We talked for a minute, and I noticed that we were the last car left in the parking lot. I asked him if someone was picking him up, and he said, "I've been waiting a fair while. My wife and my daughter will be here eventually, and we can go home together." I asked him if he wanted a ride just to the south end of the bridge, and he smiled and said that he knew that they'd be walking to meet him and they would all finish the trip together. I can't think of a worse place to walk. The Golden Gate Bridge is long, and it's freezing cold. It's a long drop to the water below. But he sounded firm, so I said, "Have a good night then." About that time I noticed that my date hadn't said a word. I look over, and he's frozen. Then he grabbed my elbow and pushed me to the car. He hurt my arm, he pushed so hard. We got in the car, and he was really speeding. We crossed the toll plaza, and he started yelling, "Who the hell were you talking to? Are you nuts? What the FCK?" He was really panicking because he'd felt that something was very, very wrong. He hadn't seen the man. He saw me have a conversation with thin air. But he said the temperature dropped so much that he was shaking. He also said the air was electric, and he thought that if we didn't get out of there, we might be two of those people who just disappear and are never found. He saw a swirl in the air and smelled tobacco smoke on the breeze. I finally figured it out. At least in my mind. This was in the 1980s. The Golden Gate Bridge was completed in 1937, and quite a few men building it died. He probably was one of them, and he was waiting for when his wife and his daughter died, and they would meet him then and go on, wherever the afterlife took them. I hope it was someplace beautiful. I never spoke to my date again. He called me Ghost Girl. I can't blame him. I had a strange encounter with a dog-like creature. Do you have any suggestions? When I was a bit younger, I had a weird experience, and I wondered if anyone has experienced anything similar or knows possibly what it could have been. I live in England and was walking down a path. To one side of me are miles of fields and trees, to the other side are houses. I look back, and from an alley emerged a weird creature. The only way I can describe it is that it skulked. The thing looked like a massive, deformed dog. Its front legs were very long, and its nose was to the floor like it was sniffing the ground like a typical dog would. I stopped and just looked because I was a bit shocked, and it looked up at me and grinned. The grin had an almost human-like "ooh, you've seen me" type of look. It then just went on its way into the bushes. I've never seen anything like this before or again. The weird thing is I didn't even feel fear until I thought back on it after and got creeped out. I know it sounds far-fetched, but can anyone genuinely give any insight? Irish giant ghost story, true. I'm from Ireland and live in England at the moment, and I had never heard of any ancient giants before, or even that skeletons had been found in the past. However, I have a true story of actually seeing one. It was maybe 5 to 7 years ago on a trip to Ireland. I'm not sure of the year exactly. A friend of mine and I saw what looked like a giant walking across the motorway in Ireland after a visit to Tara. We were heading south after coming down from a visit to the Hill of Tara in County Meath, Ireland. I was driving down the motorway, and I distinctly remember we passed a group of traveler caravans parked on the grass verge on my left side. After passing them, I could see somebody crossing the motorway ahead of the car. I first thought it might be somebody from the caravan site crossing over for some reason. But I could see this man, and he was huge. We both saw the man, the giant I will call him, clearly a really tall man, about 200 meters ahead of us as we were driving back to Dublin. And it was huge, beyond normal height, maybe at least 10 feet. It was hard to determine its exact height, but it moved very slowly with its head bowed, appeared very slim, and did not take any notice of us. And it was moving so slowly, that was the strangest thing. I thought it was somebody crossing the motorway, so I readied to brake as I was doing about 70 miles per hour, but as I approached it in the car and the giant just got to the central reservation of the motorway, which was a large hedge, it just disappeared. My friend in the passenger seat saw it too and said, "Be careful," as we approached. We both saw the same thing and described the person's features exactly. The strangeness about the man or being was the way he moved, very slowly and heavily, not fast at all, and he had long black hair with a top that went to knee length, but he had something under that, as I could not see flesh. It was not a cape but some sort of top. I can still see the image to this day, but the color was not apparent. The weather was clear, and it was daylight. Tara is a very spiritual place, and we visited the Stone of Destiny just beforehand. The stone is called Lys na Fail. So, that's what I saw, both of us. Regards. There is a shadow, or shadows, that follows my family wherever we go. We all at one point have seen it. When we first discussed it, everyone was shocked because we were all seeing a very tall man in a suit that was all pitch black. I wrote shadows the way I did because I'm unsure if there is one or multiple. My big brother and I used to see another shadow that looked like our sister. It even appeared the same to us. If it had a puff, it was not her. There was another that changed shape that again the whole family saw. It was also tall but never really took on any features. I've only ever seen it in dreams before I knew anyone else was seeing it. In the house I live in now, there is a short, child-sized thing that looks like a porcelain doll running around. Literally. All you'll see is a black blur. The only reason I know what it looks like is because one day I walked in the house, and it slowly walked across the kitchen door and even looked my way. Apparently my brothers GF and our little sis saw it too. Recently I and that same little sister have been seeing a shadow that looks like our 2-year-old nephew. Speaking of him, He will say hi in the hallway while it's empty. I thought nothing was weird, just child behavior. Well, I have a 1-year-old niece who visits weekly. She started doing it before she saw him do it, and sometimes they'll do it at the exact same times. I constantly see the same shaped shadow peeking at me around the corner. The unexplainable footsteps, a true story from 2012. In 2012, while sitting in the living room with a sibling, we heard walking steps coming from upstairs. We turned off the television and approached the bottom of the stairs to listen closely. As the sound of footsteps walked back and forth, we became frightened, and I reached for the telephone in the middle of the living room to call 911. In a moment of panic, I yelled that I was calling 911, and without realizing it, I actually dialed the number. After one ring, I realized I did not want to make the call, so I hung up. The footsteps continued, becoming louder and more distinct, as if someone was actually walking down the stairs. We were frozen, standing and looking towards the stairs, waiting for someone to appear. However, the footsteps seemed to pass right by us and continue into the room in front of us. We were too scared to move and waited for something to happen. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and we heard loud scratching sounds coming from the basement ceiling right under our feet, as if something was being torn apart and shredded. At that moment, the phone rang with a private number, and I answered. It was the police department, asking why I had called 911. I lied and said it was the baby. They said they had sent a cop as a precaution, but no one ever showed up. Our parents arrived home a short while later, and we did not tell them about the incident until a couple of years later. To this day, we have never been able to explain what happened that day. I've been having dreams, and I saw something. I wasn't sure where to share this, but I thought this might be a start and give me some answers or advice. This has been going on for almost a month. A little info about me: I live in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, and I love cryptids and anything to do with them. For fun, I and my friends would ride around old trails and gravel roads looking for scary stuff. Stupid, I know. About a month ago I started having nightmares, if you could call them that. In my dream I'm standing in a field at night. The field is covered by nice moonlight, but on the other side of the field I can see something standing there looking at me. It's a tall humanoid creature. Grayish black skin, a distorted face, and large claws. I just stand there looking at it, and it looking at me, neither of us moving, and then I wake up. When I wake up after my dream, I can smell rot. I chalked it up to being my old house, but I can smell it at friends' houses when I stay there. I've had the dream going on a month now, but tonight I was over at my friend's house, and while I was there, we had a small storm, so there were lots of branches in the roads. So on my drive home I had to come to a stop to navigate a branch in the road, and I looked out my window and across this field I saw it. The thing from my dream was standing there watching me. It was my dream in real life, except I was in my vehicle. I'm not sure what to do now or where to go from here, so I thought I'd share this here to see if anyone else had encounters like these. I've had a couple of strange things happen while out with friends if anyone's interested as well. Thanks for listening, and stay safe. River Legacy Park, Hell's Gate Screaming Bridge. Date of event, October 10, 2021. So my 3 friends and I were joking around about paranormal stuff, and we ended up at about 1 a.m., so we decided to find a paranormal spot. I came across a website with both Hell's Gate and Screaming Bridge, so that's what we decided on, as it was the same park. I feel the need to mention that one of us stayed in the car, and 2 of us went, which is pretty logical and explains a lot. However, one of us was very into this, a believer. I am pretty rational but trying to prove that this is real. So we get there and check the first entrance, looking for the trail that leads to both, to no avail. We continue to the other side of the park. We park probably half a mile from the trail, and we go looking for it. We came across it as we were all pretty tired and thinking about giving up. However, we eventually found the trail, and our reasoning was that since we had come all the way out here, we might as well continue. So we begin the trek, probably upwards of 3 miles. We recorded our checkpoints, first the halfway bridge on the original hiking trail, then the trail comes to an abrupt stop at a gate. At this point we took a break to smoke a cigarette, and when we got up to head to the hiking trail, my rolling papers, which I definitely didn't bring, appeared in the middle of the sidewalk. It was Juicy J in a Wiz Khalifa pack. I knew it was mine. Freaked out, but continue behind the gate and continue on a winding, tight bike trail deep in the forest, taking a right, 2 lefts, and another right to the gravel road. At this point, nothing is super unexplainable, just regular forest night noises. We pass Hell's Gate and go to the bridge. I have been made aware that the actual bridge where the crash happened is somewhere else, but instantly the wind picked up 3 or 4 times the speed it had been the whole night. We continue down the bridge, seeing nothing, and go back to Hell's Gate to check it out. We follow some trails behind it, calling out to spirits or anything to see something, still nothing. We begin heading back. We get to the hike trail, and I look back and see a white figure peeking out behind the tree. I assume it's one of the signs saying something to them and start walking away when my believing friend says it is something, and I look back, and a whole figure came out from behind the tree, so I say, F that shit, and start moving towards the entrance, thinking it's all over and this place is BS, which is what we're saying, and just chatting. Then we hear a gate creaking, sounds like the gate we just came from at the end of the hiking path where we saw the figure. However, my best friend, who is the most skeptical, didn't see it, so he didn't believe us. I'm walking and checking our six when the creeping starts again, more aggressive this time, and it sounds the same distance, which is impossible, so everyone explains it away when, clear as day, we hear a whistle from nearby in the trees. This freaks everyone out, so we continue on. I'm checking our six every 30 seconds, nothing but a couple regular things spooking us out. We are right at the exit, and I tell everyone to look behind us into the woods. My friend and I look back, seeing nothing for a few moments, when I believe they stop looking when, from a sign being illuminated by my light, this sign is a square about 3 feet by 3 feet with two thin metal pieces holding it up, a full white body comes out from behind, like coming out from behind a curtain, but it was a sign I could see behind. It was a tall-looking human figure but moved inhumanly. I couldn't explain it. My stomach drops, I get serious chills, and I start freaking out, talking to myself like, what did I just see? Prompting my friends to look back, they think I'm bullshitting, I assume, but they look with me, and above the sign we see a white head appear as clear as day, no facial features, nothing, a dead white. Yeah, we got the F out of there and talked about it all, coming to the conclusion that we can't explain what we just saw. We saw someone that was not a human. I've wanted to share this story for a long time but never found the right place. I've told some friends and relatives, and even they were surprised. This happened when I was around 10 or 11 years old, maybe younger. My sister was with me at the time. The place was a little far from home, a terrace farming area. I'm not sure what that type of place is exactly called, but I'll call it that for now, where many people, including my family, had land to grow crops. Back then, it was very quiet, with no one around. There were also many trees in that area, making it feel even more isolated. There used to be very few people working in the fields, and even they were far away from where we were. One afternoon, around 2 p.m., my sister and I went there to take lunch to our grandpa, who was working in the field. We stayed for a while and then started walking back home. On the way, we suddenly heard a voice and saw someone. The voice sounded like our neighbor's grandmother, who often came there to collect goat fodder. She was standing at the top of the field and called us to get something. I don't remember what exactly. My sister went up while I waited below, carrying some logs. The place was so silent, surrounded by trees, and with no one nearby, that I was already feeling scared. My legs were literally shaking while I stood there waiting. After a while, my sister came back and said she didn't see anyone up there. We both panicked because we clearly remembered hearing her voice and seeing someone wearing clothes like hers. We quickly walked home, feeling very scared. After reaching home, we went to the grandmother's house and asked if she had gone out to collect grass that day. She looked confused and said, "No, I didn't go anywhere today." That gave us chills. Even now, when I think about it, I don't understand what happened. If she wasn't there, whose voice did we hear? Who was that exactly? I realize you will probably have heard the story/tale of Harry Martindale in York all those years ago. I can assure you that when this event/experience happened, I 100% hadn't heard of it, so this was quite unique to me. After finishing work quite late, maybe around 8 p.m., my partner met me from the training ground where I was coaching. We decided to go for a pub dinner, as we quite frequently did at that point in time. There is a pub not far from where we lived back then called the Peacock Inn, Icknield Street. This is a Roman road itself. The pub indeed has its story of a Roman legionnaire who haunts its grounds. I must add I've been to that pub maybe 100 times and never seen a thing. Regardless, we enjoyed our meals and decided to make a night out of it. We stayed until last orders, then jumped in the car. We were driving along a country lane, at just after 11:30 p.m. It was the 19th of November, 2018. From memory, it was a Monday night, and, as you might well imagine, it was a pitch black night at that time of year. At a point during the journey, we reached the brow of a hill on the lane we were traveling along, our headlights affording us a good view of the dip in front of us. And the subsequent rise, again, of the road afterwards. As it was winter, there were no leaves or foliage on the trees, so we had a better than normal view. As we crested the brow, my partner, who was driving, slammed her brakes on. with the headlights still set on full beam. In the distance, at the bottom of the hill, was what appeared to be something like 20 or 30 Roman soldiers coming out of the field to our left and crossing the road dead ahead of us. The men seemed solid, but colors were hard to make out, as they seemed to be lit by a light source coming from behind them. Like a spotlight? We originally thought this was moonlight, perhaps, but, in revisiting the scenario from memory, this now seems unlikely, as it was too bright and at ground level. After crossing the road, the men appeared to vanish into the darkness of the opposite field, which suggests that moonlight was likely not involved. We both sat in silence, watching the scene unfold about 100-200 meters ahead of us. I personally was in a state of disbelief and shock. Maybe even fear? My partner was able to put her feelings into words, however, and simply said, "What the FCK is that?" While we didn't manage to actually count the precise number of men involved, I was able to see that all of the men were on foot, except for one, who was on horseback at the very front of the group. The foot soldiers appeared to be walking in twos, side by side. The horse was large, like Shire horse size, with bushy, furry legs. The mounted soldier appeared to be carrying a big, stick-like object with something around the top of it. However, it was hard to make out this object precisely due to the fact that it was witness side on. Amazingly, no other cars or traffic came up or down the road in this space of time, and, once the coast was clear, we drove, apprehensively, down the hill and back up the other side. What really flabbergasted us was the fact that, at the bottom of the hill where the figures had made their way onto the road surface, there was no physical gap in the field border/hedgerow involved. I have been lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, enough to see a ghost when I was younger, maybe 15 years old, and this was a typical translucent figure that scared the hell out of me. These figures seemed, from a distance, like normal people. Mysterious teleporting. This strange thing happened to me when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It is a 100% true story. My school knew it happened, and a few of my peers did, but no one really talked about it afterwards. No one understood what happened, so they didn't tell my family or mention it to me again after that night. I think it just scared them so much that they wanted to forget it happened, as did I. So this happened when my grade was on a school trip to our country's capital city. It was over a day's drive, so the school booked a large dorm of sorts for everyone to sleep in. The first room is a large lounge with a TV and couches. At the back of the large room, there was a dining area that contained approximately 20 long fold-out tables. Then all along the left side, both on the floor level and second story, were the bedrooms, which all contained bunk beds. You need to have an idea of the building layout for this story. So the night was relatively normal. We had dinner, played games, and went to bed. Now I had a top bunk in a room of 8 girls. We chatted and gossiped as girls that age do before going to sleep. I remember falling asleep, darkness, no dreams. Which is odd for me, as I always have vivid dreams or nightmares, but this night, nothing. Then I woke up. I woke up on a cold, wet, and hard surface. I open my eyes, and I see the stars. I was outside of the building. I sit up and look around. I had been lying in a puddle of water directly outside of the building's entrance. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt so incredibly cold I knew I couldn't be. I was so confused I just sat there for a few minutes processing everything. Eventually I managed to make myself stand and walk to the door to get back inside. The door was locked. I feel panic creeping up on me, and I just start to cry. For some reason I didn't want to wake people to get back inside. Maybe I was scared of getting in trouble? For about 20 minutes I tried to quietly wake up one of the girls in my room to let me in. But eventually a teacher had heard me and rushed to the door. At this point I was borderline hysterical, still trying not to make noise so as to not wake all the other students. My teacher was terrified. She asked how I had gotten out of the building, but I told her I didn't know. I just woke up out there. She woke up some other teachers, and she draped me in blankets to warm me. As I sit there, I can hear her talking to another teacher. She is saying that it would have been impossible for me to get out. The windows remain closed, and the keys to all the doors remain in their original hiding place. Even more concerning, there were about 6 students asleep on the couches in the living room, as there hadn't been enough beds, right next to the entrance I woke up outside of. I couldn't have walked out myself without a key, nor could any other student. If they had, they would have needed to pass the students asleep there and unbolt this heavy, noisy door. The teacher spoke to those students in the morning. Nothing had awakened them, nor had they heard any noise. One kid even admitted that he had been awake most of the time playing a game and hadn't seen me or anyone else go outside until a teacher retrieved me. The teacher spoke to the girls in my room. They said they too didn't see anyone come in or see me leave. The girl below me said the bunks were so loud that I would have woken her up. But I did leave that bunk somehow, I did leave that building, and I don't know how. No one did. The school told my mother what happened, I couldn't explain it any more than the school could. She never let me go on another school trip again. I am now 25 years old and have not experienced another event like this since then. I still, to this day, have no idea how I got outside. But just thinking about it sends shivers up my spine. Strange things are happening in my house. So let me preface this by saying that I don't think my house is haunted. We purchased it in 2022 and have only had about 3 or 4 occurrences. That being said, I do believe that we have family members who are around us from time to time. This past weekend, I was up in the living room with my 6-week-old son. He was super fussy and hadn't slept yet. It was about 2 or 3 a.m. I kept hearing things moving around in the kitchen, but every time I would go to check and see what fell or got kicked over, nothing would be out of place. Our small dog was asleep under the bassinet and our big dog was in the bedroom with my husband at this time, so it wasn't the pups. It kept happening for the rest of the early morning and almost sounded like footsteps, but I kind of just brushed it off, no big deal. The baby ended up finally sleeping around 7 a.m., and I did as well. Fast forward to tonight. I was home alone with my son and my daughter, who's 3 now. She was playing, and I noticed she walked up to a long, skinny table where I keep family pictures. She was babbling on about mom. I saw her, she came to see me, and I really didn't think much of it and just said, MMHMMM, cool, baby. There are lots of pictures over there. That's when I looked up and noticed she was pointing to a picture from Christmas in 2022 with my husband's family. She was pointing at his Mamu, who passed away in 2023. She was only 12 months old in the picture, so I really doubt that she remembered her. I was a little spooked, so I asked her again, what do you mean? And she told me she saw her, and she came through her door. I've always believed in the paranormal, and I find it comforting that Mamu came to visit her. So, something bizarre occurred a few months ago to me. I thought I would share my experience with the world to hear if anyone else has experienced something like this. I live in Georgia, US, for some context. A few months ago, somewhere around 6 to 3 months ago, I can't recall, I was at my house, and it was getting kind of late, dark, and my whole family was home, but everyone, my parents and my brother, was in their respective rooms. Random detail, but my parents were blasting a movie, and I recall this vividly. I went downstairs to microwave a frozen dinner and noticed 2 of my 4 dogs, Daisy and, I believe, Bella, if my memory serves me correctly, were not in my parents' room. They are babied by my parents and are really attached, and I gestured with the few keywords they understand to see if they wanted to use the bathroom. Something like want to go to the bathroom? They respond well to this when they need to go out. They got up and were clearly thrilled to go out. So I let both dogs out. I made my dinner in the microwave, and as my dinner finished, I noticed neither of the dogs had returned yet. My backyard has a brick patio, and beyond the patio is a huge slope that goes down a bit far into my backyard, so usually they are out of view when using the bathroom, and we have to call out to them if they are taking a while. It had been around 5 to 6 minutes, and I'm a bit annoyed because I want to go back upstairs to my room at this point with my dinner. We have a light at the back door, and I was waiting for them near the glass door for them to emerge from the darkness and into the light to let them back in. My dining table is very close to the glass door, so I just sat down nearby and started eating while I waited. Shortly after, I hear upstairs that the movie had been paused in my parents' room, so it's no longer blasting audio, and shortly after, my father opens his door upstairs, and my dogs are going crazy running downstairs ahead of my father because they clearly want to use the bathroom. I was speechless. I saw all 4 of the household's dogs as plain as day, and my father let them all out in the backyard right in front of me. All I could think was, well, if the dogs were in my parents' room, then what did I let into the backyard? And it started to feel spookier as I realized it made a lot of sense why, if it were something abnormal, it would make sense that's why they or it did not come back to the door. I follow paranormal stuff because I think it is cool, and definitely all my mind could think of was spirits and shapeshifters or something of the nature. I'm a skeptic for the most part. Please, if anyone has any similar experiences, share them with me in the comments. I mentioned this to my brother, and he basically just called me crazy and cringe lol. My parents heard the story and maybe found it entertaining, but not much beyond that. My boyfriend and I took a short fishing trip with our dog and ended up in Big Bend National Park. We're new to Texas, so we didn't know we needed to make reservations to tent camp at such a large park. So when we got there we went up on the top of the hill where everyone goes to watch the stars, and it was packed. Literally, not a single spot. So we drove a few minutes away and decided to park the car at the top of a trailhead and sleep in the car, since they have bears there apparently. So we had a normal night and got ready for bed and went to sleep. We both woke up at 3:30 and had a weird feeling about sleeping there. We decided to return to Austin, where we live, early this morning since we were both awake. The first 5 minutes were pretty quiet, but we didn't have any signal, so we rolled the windows down. As we approached a fork in the road leading out of the park, a rabbit suddenly collided with the side of our car. We keep driving, and another one booms into the side of the car. Then boom, number 3. 2 or 3 minutes apart each. As we stopped the car to check if number 3 was okay, we heard something scream, "Help me." We both believe in skinwalkers. So we looked at each other, and I said, "Drive the car now." So we kept driving. I still think about what would have happened if one of us had gotten out of the car that night. I get goosebumps thinking about it every time. The Stratford, Connecticut ghost. Also known as the Stratford poltergeist from the 19th century. Reverend Eliakim Phelps had lost his first wife, Elizabeth, and was so distraught he longed to hear from her again. 2 years after Elizabeth died, Eliakim remarried to a young widow with a couple of kids. Still, he longed to hear from his first wife. This was around the time the Fox sisters and the spiritualist movement were taking the world by storm. So the Reverend decided to hold a seance to see if he could contact his dead wife against the advice from a friend who participated. It's unclear exactly how this seance was conducted, but nothing happened that night until it did. It was a few days later when the Reverend and his family returned from church, and upon entering their house, they discovered it was in disarray. They thought someone broke in, but no evidence was found. So shrugging it off as a bluff of some sort, they proceeded to clean up and get the house back in order. Later for evening church services, Eliakim sent his family ahead and stayed behind just in case the intruder returned. No intruder ever did, but he did hear creaks and groans, which caused him to explore, and to his horror, figures were standing around in a room that appeared to be female. He went to tap on the shoulder of the nearest one. It fell to reveal it was an effigy, his wife's stuffed dresses with rags and pillows. As soon as that one collapsed, the rest followed. Subsequently, he began to receive anonymous notes. "When are you going to leave, Sam Slick?" He kept getting these same notes asking when he was going to leave. One day, he reached a breaking point and declared his intention to depart in October. Satisfied, the ghost left him alone, and the Phelps family left. But his story went, as we would call it, viral. It made many newspapers and magazines of its day. I was intrigued by this story when I saw it on lore and became curious to know if it was true, and sure enough, it was. The house remains beautiful and continues to be a topic of discussion. Don't think it will make the Conjuring franchise since the Warrens weren't involved. Being it was before their time. The Phelps are long dead, and as far as anyone knows, there has been no paranormal activity since. My wife and I moved into my parents' house when my uncle died unexpectedly in 2009. They had to move in with my grandmother to take care of her, so we assumed ownership of my parents' house. Now this house had been the watering hole for my town back in the day. The well is in my basement. It is a hole in my basement floor covered by a 5-foot wide slate rock. This is important because our priest told us spirits can travel along waterways, which is why every time we bless the house, it is only calm for a few months before things start happening again. Anyways, we move into the house, and things are nice. Everything is calm, and my wife, fiancée at the time, and I are happy to be out of my sister's house. Once my wife gets pregnant, things kick into high gear. Her shoes go missing on a daily basis when every day she puts them in the same spot after work. One day, when she was in the attic, she heard a woman ask, "Is that my baby?" She said the woman sounded genuinely confused as to whose unborn baby she was pregnant with. Things kept escalating until one night when I was just about to turn off the lights and go to bed when I saw a black mass by my wife's side of the bed. It was pitch black and completely solid. Before I realized what I was looking at, my hand flipped off the lights, and my sleeping wife immediately started speaking in what sounded like French. Since we took French in high school and college, we deduced that she was saying Jamie Suze, which means I am myself. The next evening we were at play rehearsal for our local acting group, and we were talking to our friend, Rhonda. As we were talking with her about random bits of small talk, we noticed she seemed very distracted. She kept glancing quickly from side to side, the way you would if you were watching a bug zigzag around a room. We asked what was going on, and she said, "I know this sounds crazy, but there is this black thing in the auditorium. Every time I look at it, it moves. I just can't get a fix on it." We freak out and immediately tell her our story. We leave the auditorium and call a priest to have a blessing for the house. While he is blessing the house, He pauses and glances at one of the crosses hanging on the wall. After the blessing is over, he asks about it. My wife says it is beautiful and it called to her. She had to have it, she said. He leaned back and said, "That's interesting, it's a Benedictine crucifix." We reply with okay? And he continues to say, Benedictine crucifixes are used in exorcisms. It is very interesting that this crucifix called to you so strongly. That is my big paranormal story. I have a ton of little ones about missing shoes and finding them in the attic, but this event was the turning point for how we view our house. A weird light just followed me. I'm uncertain whether this is the appropriate place for my inquiry, but I wanted to come here to see if anyone could provide an explanation for what just happened. I was walking my dog with my mom and sister, and it is really cold and snowy outside. We decided to cut through a small neighborhood to get home quicker because we were all cold. As we cut through the neighborhood, I noticed a really bright light down another street. It was so bright it looked like a high beam light of a car. My sister and I both noted the light and thought it was weird. About a minute later, we were almost out of the neighborhood, and I looked behind us, and the light was right behind us. It was so blindingly bright I couldn't see anything past it or make out what it was. It was moving so slowly it looked like it was floating, and there was absolutely no noise at all of footsteps or anything. I noticed it was following us and tried to get my sister and mom's attention, but they were distracted with our dog and didn't look back until a few seconds later. My sister noticed and said it was following us and we should go. My mom said it was a bike at first, but she got freaked out when she saw how slowly it was moving and how extremely bright the light was. We sped out of the neighborhood quickly with it still following us, but it suddenly stopped at the end of a pathway and stayed there until we were far away. Once we got far enough away, I was watching to see if I could see another angle of it to figure out what it was. Before the light came out of the pathway, two girls walking their dog walked by and turned in the opposite direction when they saw the light. It very slowly came out of the pathway, and I could only see the figure of a really tall man with a huge hunch in his back, and he was pushing what looked like a cart with the bright light attached. I'm still confused, though, because there was absolutely no noise coming from the cart or his footsteps behind us. It was silent outside, and there's snow and ice on the ground, so I feel like we would have heard the cart rolling through the snow. The figure didn't even look in our direction when he came out of the pathway. The whole thing was just so creepy. We had to run a quick errand after walking our dog, so we decided to drive around our neighborhood to see if the guy with the bright light was still there, and he was gone. So now we are all feeling pretty creeped out. Whether it was paranormal or just a person, it's still weird. How was there no sound? Why would a normal person be walking around with a light that was almost brighter than a high beam light? But the weirdest thing of all is how quickly it got behind us. It was at the end of another street, and in about a minute, it was behind us. It was moving so slowly, so how did it get behind so quickly? Especially since it was a man pushing a cart, like it's not even possible to walk that fast and get that close so quickly. Anyways, if anyone has any paranormal or more logical explanations for this weird experience, please let me know. Unexplained real-life incidents. I want to share 4 experiences from a few years ago that still bother me today. I'd really appreciate an explanation. 1. A few years back, I was hanging out and smoking hash with 3 friends between 8 and 11 p.m. at a secluded area. There was just a single house within a 200-meter radius. Suddenly, I felt a strong urge to open my selfie camera and record everything before I zoned out. About 1.5 to 2 hours later, around 10:45 p.m., a big, bright, warm light flashed before my eyes, quickly fading into darkness. There was no actual light source. At that moment, the man from the nearby house started shouting at us, telling us to leave or he'd call the police. We all went home. Oddly, I was facing away from him, not toward him. The next day, I checked my gallery and saw the video I had recorded. My friend was singing a song, pretending his hand was a microphone. But it wasn't his voice, it sounded like he was actually singing into a real mic, with an echo effect. I freaked out and put my phone down, but I felt an overwhelming urge to delete the video immediately, so I did. Later that evening, when my same friends visited, I was humming the same song while smoking a cigarette my friend brought. He jumped up and asked how I knew the song, since he had just written it 3 to 4 hours earlier. I couldn't explain it. 2. 3 years after that incident, I was drinking and having fun with another friend by a riverbank. I zoned out again, and when I came back, I envisioned my father honking behind me and asking, "Where are you roaming around?" with a smile on his face, as I was walking home near a pharmacy in my neighborhood. I ignored the vision and kept walking home, since I was pretty drunk. But when I reached the exact spot near the pharmacy with my vision, I heard a honk, turned around, and saw my dad roll down his window and ask me the exact same question, with the same smile. It gave me chills. 3. One afternoon, I napped and dreamed that 2 of my old school bullies were verbally abusing me. In the dream, I noticed a strangely shaped light above my head. Suddenly, one of them grabbed my neck and pinned me against a wall, and I woke up right after. It was a pretty intense dream. Later that evening, I went for a walk. On my way back, I saw 2 neighborhood guys, not the same ones from my dream, burning tires and plastic in the middle of the street. I asked them to stop, which led to an argument and then a fistfight. The fight played out just like my dream. One guy held my arm while the other pressed me by the neck against the wall. I was more shocked than frustrated. Luckily, a neighborhood uncle walked by and broke up the fight. I went home and couldn't stop thinking about how my dream had just come true. I saw what appeared to be ghosts and possibly traveled to another dimension. I don't know if I'm going crazy. I'm 19 years old, and I'm from Peru. Paranormal things started happening in my house with simple things like seeing shadows, hearing noises, and things like that. But lately, stranger things have been happening. A few weeks ago, I was in the bathroom washing my face when I saw a shadow quickly pass by in the mirror. I thought it was my little nephew. I asked my sister, his mom, and she said, "Did you see it too? The baby is in the living room." We both wondered what it was, but we couldn't find anything. A couple of days ago, I was at the family shop in the market. I was bored since there were no customers, so I leaned on the counter. For a moment, I felt my body extremely light and a chill. Suddenly, everything around me changed. The aisle where my shop was located grew longer, the floor received better paving, the stalls in the market transitioned from their original green color to blue, people suddenly appeared and proceeded comfortably, and even the radio music underwent a change. It lasted a few seconds as I stood up in confusion, and everything went back to normal. After that, I felt chills, my heart was racing, and I felt generally unwell. Today, before closing the shop, I went to the bathroom. I was alone at the urinal and saw a small shadow pass behind me. The walls were porcelain, so you could slightly see reflections. Something was behind me, so I quickly turned around, and there was nothing. The bathroom was still empty. I told my mom and my girlfriend everything I wrote, each at different times, but both times I felt the same chill and pressure in my chest and started trembling the same way I am now as I write this. I don't know if I'm going crazy or if something else is happening. Has anyone experienced something similar? My mom didn't believe me and said I must have imagined it due to being worn out. My girlfriend says she doesn't believe in those things but remains neutral. I would appreciate any assistance. Weird shit happens at night. Hi, I'm sharing this because I'm the kind of guy that never really believed in ghosts, but somehow strange things keep happening in my house at night. To start off, last night I suddenly woke up, I was in bed, didn't know the time, and heard noises coming from the kitchen downstairs, like someone was opening and closing drawers. I heard it 2 times. I checked my bed, the cat was with me. Anyway, I eventually just fell asleep. But the situation actually reminded me of other strange shit that happened, and I actually removed it. For example, about 2 months ago I woke up in the middle of the night, heard some weird sounds coming from the furniture downstairs, very unnatural ones though, and I even heard something fall pretty violently to the floor. I checked my bed, the cat wasn't with me that night, so I thought it could have been, but still stayed vigilant. After a while my eyes kind of adapted to the darkness and started seeing better. That's when I started hearing some odd noises coming from my closet's doors, like something was passing really close to scratching them. The weird thing was that the room was completely empty, and I saw there was nothing next to the doors. I kept looking and being vigilant, still had no idea what was happening, until after a while I felt something quickly touch and caress the upper part and back of my head. Something with no temperature. I think it was scary as shit, honestly, because I had no ducking explanation for that. My bed is located right next to the wall, the back of my head was facing it, and there was nothing else in the room with me. Another time I was lying in bed, probably early evening or morning, and turned around to look at the door and saw the outline of a black head looking at me from beside the door. As soon as I looked at it, it retreated behind the door in an instant and disappeared. Any explanations? I grew up in a house built at the turn of the century. There was a part of the semi-finished basement that felt really creepy. The hair stood up on the back of my neck thinking about it, but other than that, it wasn't a creepy house, and none of the 4 members of my family ever felt anything was off. During my high school years, my sister was away in college. That summer, I frequently had dreams about women singing in the kitchen adjacent to my room. I dismissed it, assuming I was simply experiencing intense dreams just before waking up. But a couple of months later, I was in school, and my sister was home visiting for a week from college. She was home alone taking a nap and said she woke up to two male voices yelling and fighting in her room. We all kind of just shrugged it off. But that event started off approximately 6 months of fear for all of us. Almost every night after we would hear voices getting steadily louder and louder after we all tried to go to bed. You could never make out what they were saying. It sounded like a TV or radio left on in another room. Very clearly 1 to 2 voices, but couldn't understand them. My mom was sleeping in my sister's room one night, my sister wasn't home, and my dad has narcolepsy and sleeps in the basement room. He's the only one that never heard any of this because he takes medication that makes him pass out. I honestly don't remember where I was, but I wasn't there. She said she heard one of the male voices start up wailing, like he was calling or searching for his friend and crying. She says the voice got so loud it completely filled the room, and she was so terrified she went and drove to my grandma's house. Sorry, Dad, you're on your own lol. Several nights my mom and I slept in the parlor with all the lights and the TV on after we heard the voices start. We drove to my grandma's a few times. I'm spiritual, but definitely not a Christian, but my mom is. She made us walk around the house, blessing it with holy water and olive oil. The first time we did this, we blessed everywhere but the attic. When we finally got to the attic, in the last corner we heard a very definite noise that sounded like a sigh or grunt. We just looked at each other, turned around, and left. It was terrifying. We walked around saying the Lord's Prayer and blessing the house every night. After a while the voices completely stopped. My parents still live in that house, and they still haven't come back, thankfully. But I agree with you, it sounded much more like a repetitive imprint of some kind rather than an intelligent haunting. My mom thinks my sister's bad state of mind could have been a trigger or encouraged whatever it was to come forward. And no, there was no carbon monoxide leak, my parents had and still have a monitor. This was a 6 to 7 month event in a house they've been in now for almost 20 years. I'm also going to stop thinking about this. It's been years, and every time I have to write out this experience, it's like I'm living it all over again. Have a great day. When I was a child, I vividly recall having an imaginary friend. He felt like a big brother or older cousin. His name was Hugh. I remember the day he wasn't there anymore. I was 4. I howled and screamed for hours. I felt like I was dying. Like 16 years later, I went to my aunt's house to babysit my 4-year-old cousin. She was an extremely calm child, I never saw her upset. I walked in the front door, and it was like World War III. She was red-faced, screeching at the top of her lungs, and bawling her eyes out to the point that my aunt was considering calling in sick to work to mind her. I asked my aunt what was wrong, and she said, her imaginary friend disappeared. Eventually she calmed down, and my aunt went to work. My cousin told me about her imaginary friend, who was her big brother called Hugh. She told me what he was like, and he was exactly like my own imaginary friend. A few years ago, another aunt was researching our family tree and found out that at age 16, my grandmother's uncle walked out the front door to go to work and was never seen again. He doted on his little sister, and she was never the same again when he disappeared. She was 4. His name was Hugh. Nobody ever found out what happened to him. I never knew this story as a child, and neither did my cousin. I like to think that we reminded Hugh of his sister in some way, and he wanted to look out for us like a big brother. When I was growing up, our house had strange things constantly happen. My whole family has always had a weird connection to paranormal things, so for me it was normal to experience things from time to time. However, when I was about 16, things took a dark turn. My mom became very ill, requiring surgery and 2 hospital stays. It came completely out of nowhere. She had been very healthy until this happened. We started hearing voices that we couldn't really understand. It was like mumbling in the background but always very ominous. Then it started mimicking my family. My mom would hear me come in and tell her it was time to wake up from a nap while I was actually sitting on the couch, or I would hear her come into the kitchen and sigh while she was truly asleep. The worst part was that I couldn't sleep. Every time I started to doze off, I would see in my mind a black figure standing in the doorway, watching me. It always felt like it was just waiting for something. I started getting really freaked out by it, so one night I was sitting on my bed, and I decided I would pray about what was going on. My bed was the kind that had a frame and wooden slats that went across to hold up the mattress. So I'm sitting there praying, asking God to protect me, and I remember thinking, keep this thing away from me, whether it's a dark spirit or demon, if demons are even real. And it's like this thing heard me questioning if it was real, because as soon as I thought that, something hit my bed so hard one of the slats fell out and the foot of my mattress hit the floor. I know the slat didn't just slip because I felt it hit the bed and the whole mattress shake. I was out of that room so fast, and we moved not long after. About 10 years ago, when I was a kid, I was leaving my friend's house right up the road from my house. He kind of lived on a small hill, so you could see my house from his. My friend comes outside with me, and we are talking and laughing. As soon as I turn to see my house, I see my front door swing open and a grayish figure runs out. Too fast for a human and all gray, like a bat out of hell. Then disappeared into the darkness of the street. Nothing but fear came over me. My friend saw my door open but nothing come out. His dad had to walk me home because I was too scared to walk by myself, even though it would have taken less than a minute to get to my house. Shortly after I got home, my brother had to be taken to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. I told my mom about this, who is very into the paranormal. She believes it was some sort of demon or cryptid. Something else that I want to add is the figure didn't have feet, it was like it was hovering as it was running. It's like it saw me looking at it and ran. Another story I have is when I and some friends went to a graveyard. There was a mausoleum we went into. In about 5 to 10 minutes, we heard someone talking outside. We hid but didn't hear footsteps. One of my friends decided to wait in her car outside of it for us since she was getting freaked out. We started hearing knocking. My best friend wanted to stay longer and even said he would get an Uber back home because he wanted to stay. So I decided to stay longer. I was walking my GF to my friend's car because she wanted to leave. As soon as we stepped outside of the building, we heard, "Hello, talk to me, please, please talk to me. I know you can hear me." We noticed another person sitting in the car with our friend, but she didn't even know. As soon as we got to the window, we heard a very loud scream, which made our friend jump. My best friend, who was inside the building, comes running out because he heard it too. We started hearing a lot of voices. We all jumped in the car and started to leave. As we were leaving, we saw someone running towards us and then disappear as soon as they got in front of the car. We all looked behind, and the person was still running. We all were freaking out. We didn't visit that graveyard for a while after that. I saw a creature, and no one believes me. It's making me go crazy, please help. I lived in a neighborhood, a small cul-de-sac, in King and Queen County, Virginia, about 3 to 4 years ago. I'd only lived there for maybe a year, and things were always a little off. From me almost getting kidnapped in my own yard to an old man running at me with a stick after chasing a squirrel near his yard, things weren't the safest. One night, maybe about 10 to 11 at night, I needed water and went to the kitchen. Our kitchen was located at the back of the house and was connected to a spacious back porch that featured a large deck, which could easily accommodate over 20 people and a high-quality grill without any issues. There was one big window above the sink with super thin curtains that was always open because we didn't have AC back then. So, I had gotten my bottle of water, and while taking a sip, I kind of felt like something was staring at me. So, I closed the fridge door and turned my whole body to look straight at the window. I saw the thing. It was just staring at me with these sad, dead-looking eyes. The whole thing in general was so messed up looking I really don't know how to describe it. I was frozen for a second, but for some reason I walked exactly 2 steps closer to the window, I guess because I just didn't understand what I was looking at, and the thing took off. I ran to the window and watched the thing run on all fours and jump over the neighbor's fence, causing their German shepherds to start going off, so I know it wasn't just my imagination. I became obsessed with it and drew it and showed my friends and even told and showed my dad, but they all laughed it off like some joke, and it's not a joke. I saw it pretty frequently after that. It would show up at my school, house, woods, and everywhere, and there was a higher number of dead animals around that time too. After a few months it slowly started not appearing as much and completely stopped 2 to 3 months before I moved from that area. I generally forgot about the whole thing until I and my BF were talking about cryptids, and I told him about what I saw. Now that I remember, I'm obsessed again and need help with what that thing was and if someone else has seen anything similar. I think I'm going crazy. No matter how many times I look up what it looked like or do deep dives on cryptids, nothing comes up, and I'm starting to think maybe everyone was right and it was just my imagination. But I know what I saw, and someone has to know what I'm talking about, so please, someone help me. Witnessed weird figures at night and need help dissecting what it could be. I'm hoping that someone has had a similar experience because I feel like I'm going crazy. I just want to start off by saying that I don't have a history of sleep paralysis, and I've never witnessed anything like this in my 27 years of life. It started a few weeks ago when I decided to give up smoking weed. Usually I sleep throughout the night and have no history with insomnia. The first few days of no smoking were fine, but then one night I went to sleep at 11 and kept waking up every hour or so. When I woke up for the 3rd time, I turned to the side and closed my eyes to try sleeping again. Then, I felt this weird pressure sensation and ringing noise in my head that got louder and louder. It lasted about 5 seconds, so I opened my eyes to see what it was since I've never felt it before, and in the corner of my room I saw a woman wearing a black cloak with her hair down covering her entire face and two shadowy figures beside her. I immediately closed my eyes and kept saying, "I do not consent. You are not welcome," until I had the courage to open my eyes again, and she was gone. Needless to say, it left me terrified. My heart rate shot up, and my entire body was drenched in sweat. Then a few nights ago I felt the same pressure sensation in my head when I woke up in the middle of the night. This time I just said a little prayer to myself until the pressure and ringing sensation left. I also sleep with more lights on than usual in hopes of keeping an eye out in my room. Last night, I woke up again in the middle of the night after tossing and turning multiple times, and this time the pressure was so intense, and I saw weird shapes while my eyes were closed. This time I blurted out loud for whatever was there to leave and said that whatever it is not welcome and to go away. It only happens on nights that I don't smoke weed before sleeping because I'm trying to cut down. I've been smoking multiple times a day for 7 years. I'm wondering if anyone else has had any similar experience like this and what I can do to make it stop. Going to sleep terrifies me now, and I get so much anxiety that the sensation is going to come back or get worse. I take melatonin before I sleep, but it hasn't helped with the insomnia. I'm also a full-time student, so I cannot risk being sleep deprived and ducking up my GPA this semester. My family has many stories like this. They say it's the banshee. My grandparents told us all the banshee has followed our family since before anyone could remember. To them it was a blessing, a warning provided only to those with pure Irish ancestry. They also told me it wasn't a wailing woman like portrayed in Hollywood, at least not always that. It manifested itself in many ways. Every story I have has the same recurring pattern of threes. I'll tell one story. I grew up during the Troubles in the North, when it was bad. I'm the eldest of 5 children. At this time I was 10. My father was a builder who left home early, normally to travel across the north in a van full of lads to do a day's work. These were the days when workmen were getting executed just because of their surnames in a vicious tit for tat, where every day you'd hear of some brutal murders like this. My mother was always worried my dad would be one of these men picked out because of who he was. I, too, as a child, was always worried in the same way. My father was a young man, and there were no mobiles, of course, so very occasionally he wouldn't come home when he should, deciding to go to the pub with the lads after a hard day. Anyway, this day he didn't come home. My mom was distraught and phoned all the usual haunts. No one had seen him. My mom was very distressed, and I couldn't sleep. As the eldest, I didn't know what to do, but I thought I'd stay up with her, both not saying but thinking the worst. I have to say we at that time lived in a row of houses 200 meters long with no breaks or alleyways between them. If you wanted to get to the back, you had a long walk around the exterior of the block, if you can imagine. So then, out of the blue, at around midnight came 3 loud, slow knocks to the front door. Knock, knock, knock. My mother yelped, jumped up, and ran to the door, believing the worst. This is the police. The moment she put her hand on the latch and opened the door, no one was there. Then came 3 loud, slow knocks, but now from the back door. Knock, knock, knock. Remember, this would have taken at least a minute or two to reach. My mom and I confusedly moved to the back door, unsure of what was happening. Is this a joke? But the whole emotion of the moment made it feel sinister, not a prank. Mom opened the back door, and then knock, knock, knock. Now from the front once more. At this point my mom was distraught, and she ran to the front door, enthused with some sort of fight or flight, I guess, to shout this time, "Who are you? What do you want?" as she opened the front door. To see an empty step. At that exact moment my father pulled up loaded drunk, thinking everything was funny and playing it down as a man of that era might. The next morning we got a phone call. It woke me like someone had slapped me hard round the face. Our uncle had been shot 3 times in the head in Belfast that morning by the UVF and was killed. You tell me, what was that? In my town, outsiders disappear. Hello. So I come from a very strange town full of very strange things, from a diner appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye to a ghost ship that seems to border our sea. Let's just say when it comes to strange things, this town does not disappoint. My name is James. I've lived in this town for 30 years, and for as long as I can remember, there have been no children other than the ones born here that have ever lived in this town. Well, I wouldn't say never. You see, in this town children just simply disappear. I don't know if it's cursed or if this town simply does not like outsiders. The year is 1990. I was an 8th grader in junior high and captain of the school's basketball team. We had a pretty solid record so far, and we were set to face our arch rivals. This team was no joke either. After all, they were undefeated and had one of the best scorers in the state on their team, 12-year-old Jack Harvey. He was considered to be the prospect everyone wanted going into high school. Well, that all changed the night of the big game when he disappeared. The day everyone was waiting for had finally come. The final bell had rung, and school was let out for the weekend. While many paired off and did what they wanted, most were excited to attend the late-night November game that would soon change the town forever. It was 5 p.m. on November 16, 1990, and everyone was filling up the Central Middle School gym for what should be the game of the year. Buses pulled into the oversized parking lot, and the rival team poured off of them like they were a bunch of sweaty nerds at a convention. The time was soon 6:30 p.m., and both teams were taking the court. One by one the score went up, and the parents of both sides were erupting into what seemed to be a mix of cheers and boos, as if this place was about to be a riot zone. I passed to Ryan, who passed to Josh, who went for a layup to tie it up, but just as he did, the whistle blew. It was time for halftime. We all went to the locker room to either get hydrated or snack on something when a scream was heard from the opposing locker room. The coaches rushed in to see what was going on, and to everyone's horror, Jack was gone, only his shoes with bloodstains all over them remained. The coaches backed into the hall, where my team was waiting to see what was going on. The coaches shielded us from the view of the locker room, and we quickly realized Jack wasn't the only one missing. The coaches were overheard by some of my other teammates talking about how 3 other young boys from the opposing team were now missing. The sheriff's department soon arrived, and an investigation was underway. Everyone from my team to their team, including coaches and parents, was questioned, but nothing ever came of it. It's as if the boys simply disappeared. The rest of the game was cancelled from there on out, and an early curfew was put into effect for the town. Any and all children under 17 had to be inside by 5 p.m. and were not to leave under any circumstance until 9 a.m. the next morning. A few weeks have passed since their disappearance, and that's all the cops can talk about. That was until another boy visiting his grandmother from a neighboring town went missing as well. The sheriff's department, now on high alert, started shifting their attention to predators that lived in the area. Of course, they turned up nothing with this, and by the end of December, the case went cold. The new year came and went with no new leads, and the families were starting to give up. Then, on February 10, 1991, 3 months after the kids went missing from Central Middle School, the sheriff's office received its first break in the case. A homeless man by the name of Carl Adams reported seeing the boys wander into the old mining shafts outside of town at 2 a.m. Saturday morning, one day after the big game. The sheriff's department rushed to the mines and searched them from top to bottom, only for them to disappear. The search for the missing deputies and children went on for 3 weeks after that and turned up nothing. That was until June 2, 1991, 4 months after the sheriff's deputies went missing, one actually turned up. Stumbling into town babbling on about a force of nature taking them away, Deputy Morrison looked to be out of his mind. The sheriff took his report and pretty much tossed it out, as well as locking him away in the state mental asylum, where he remains today. The mines collapsed in 2004, and nobody has been in or out since. It remains a cold case to this day, 33 years later. My heart truly goes out to the missing and the 17 other kids who have gone missing in our town since, but in reality, I'm just glad it wasn't me and that it's just another blip in our town's weird history. Wyoming, dog-rabbit hybrid sighted. A man in Jefferson City says he saw and ran over a creature resembling a dog and a rabbit. The 52-year-old Missourian, who provided a full name and contact information but asked to remain anonymous, claims he was driving from Colorado to South Dakota when he came across the being. I was going from Colorado Springs to Rapid City. It was about 1 a.m. when I came over a small hill on Highway 85 just north of Lusk, Wyoming, the IT senior manager told Cryptozoology News about the May 2012 incident. As I came over the hill, I saw a creature in my headlights that looked like an oversized white rabbit. The man says he unsuccessfully tried not hitting the animal. As I came over the hill at high speed, it was right in front of me in the road. I swerved right, and it hopped left, but I still clipped it. Slammed on the brakes and reversed to look for it, but did not see it anywhere. He goes on to say that he was unable to find its body or blood in the car, but that the animal left a dent in the vehicle. However, he continues, he has since sold the car, so he can't provide the physical evidence. The driver, who says he clearly saw the creature with the car headlights, describes the creature as a 2-foot 6-inch tall rabbit with a length of about 4 feet. Its fur resembled that of a poodle, and it was white, wavy, and silky. It looked like a dog-rabbit cross, although its face was more canine than rabbit-looking. It had very big, dark eyes and big ears. It hopped like a rabbit with its huge hind feet, but much slower, he said. The eyewitness added that he had never seen anything strange before this sighting. In 2016, a child in Wisconsin claimed to have seen a horned rabbit. Arizona author and Bigfoot researcher Mitchell Wade in 2014 said he and his team had seen a giant rabbit but were unable to capture it on video due to an unexpected camera malfunction they believe could be linked to the additional strange activity linked to the area. In late 2015, a biological scientist said he and his wife were in the wilderness of the region between the United States and Canada when they spotted a giant beaver in 2007. In 1983, a man allegedly encountered a similar creature in an undisclosed location in the state of Maine. He said the animal was about 14 feet long and believes it weighed over 300 pounds. Had a few experiences with spooky shit. I have seen a dead friend a few times since he passed. Smelled him too. The old house was haunted as duck, not even joking. All of us, myself, my partner, and the kids, have seen and heard weird, creepy stuff. My mother, when she was staying with us, also saw weird shit. I genuinely think something is following us because in 4 different houses, really scary stuff kept happening. From simple stuff like lights turning on and off and cupboards opening and closing themselves to us hearing something whispering our names. Once I felt my partner get into bed and cuddle up to me, except it wasn't him, he was still at work. We both saw a terrifying thing in his old apartment too. It scared us so much we moved out just a few weeks later. We didn't feel safe or comfortable there anymore. I also heard something calling my name repeatedly from downstairs one night and I just refused to go down. My partner heard it too. My family has a very deep spiritual connection to the paranormal, as I've had a family member predict his own death, had a cursed knife in a house, and my mother saw 2 ghosts as a kid. One scared her so much that she still does the old school superstition of putting a silver coin at the front door under the carpet to ward off bad luck and bad spirits. Possibly because she's Asian, we were raised to respect the spirits and the dead, so maybe we're a little more open/susceptible to it, I don't know. My favorite is seeing my dead friend. The first 2 times, I bawled. But now when I spot him, it's nice. He simply checks in once or twice a year to see how I'm doing. I frequently have very weird things happen, like thinking of someone I haven't spoken to in years and then suddenly getting a call from them or running into them. I'm happy to share more, but I'm very aware of how ridiculous this all sounds, and I also don't want to bore anyone. Weird things are happening. It's okay if you don't believe in Ouija boards or think there's a logical explanation. So it started a few days ago when I decided to use an Ouija board. After a few minutes, I called it complete garbage and put it away. I had gotten a few responses, but I kind of thought some part of me was moving the planchette. So I just put it away without saying goodbye, and everything was fine until the next day. The next day, when I was leaving the room, I turned off the light in my room, but I came back a few minutes later and the light was on. Maybe it was some power thing, I had thought. I was sitting on the couch later that day, and as I was reading a book, one of those pads that you put a mug on flew off the table it was on. The weird part was there was no breeze in the room. The next morning I woke up to the sound of feet rushing through the hallways. I went to open the door when the steps got close to my room, like right in front of my room, but when I opened the door, nobody was there. Now, just an hour ago, a little battery-powered lantern that I saw was off when I went outside had turned on when I went back outside a few minutes later. I have honestly no idea what is going on. This is more about a place that doesn't exist. In 2006, I was living in San Antonio, Texas, with my late boyfriend, who was from Birmingham, Alabama. When I came home after a closing shift, I found my boyfriend hysterical in the back of a cop car because he had just been informed that his dad had passed away suddenly. He, of course, wanted to run to Birmingham right away. I convinced him to stay until we knew more and he was in a better state to travel. A few days later, we set off to attend the funeral, get items from his dad's house he wanted, and visit a few of his friends on the way back. We decided to time our drive to be overnight, arriving early in the morning so that we'd crash out and then meet his mom in the afternoon at his dad's place. I insisted on driving because I was still worried about his mental state, and he'd be the backup when I wanted to rest for an hour or two. Going along the I-10, we hit New Orleans about 11:30 p.m. We were starving, so I asked him to keep an eye out for signs to off-ramps with food choices that might be open this hour, even if it was a gas station. He's a notoriously bad co-pilot/navigator and points stuff out as we're passing it. I ended up turning around to go back down the freeway westward so he could look again. And then back eastward again. Finally I got fed up and, I'll admit, passive-aggressively chose a random off-ramp and turned down the street. After a couple of blocks, it was clear that it was only residential stuff. Oops. I apologized, admitted my mistake, and turned around to go back to the freeway. Suddenly he pointed out a house, saying, "There's food." Pulling in front of it to see what he meant, it was a plain-looking 2-story house, but it did have 2 neon signs. One was the standard open sign, and the other said "Good Eats." Beyond that, it just looked like a house. I had doubts, but he pointed out how other houses on this street closest to the freeway had signs and businesses too. He was right. I was still worried they simply left the signs on. There was no way they could be open at almost midnight. He wanted to at least. They were open. A plump 50-ish black woman welcomed us in. The bottom floor of her house was cozy and had all kinds of 2- and 4-seat tables in every room. We were the only people. She insisted and practically pushed us into chairs and handed us simple handwritten menus. Like each one was handwritten. Not a copy of an original handwritten one. I had a dirty rice dish with sausage, and he tried jambalaya for the first time in his life. It was all so good. The whole time, she made friendly chit-chat and had us laughing. A second, slightly younger and slightly less plump woman came and went, serving us, but she only smiled and didn't stay. Eventually, I asked for the bill so we could get moving and let her close. She refused, saying it was on the house since it was among the last bits she had for the day. We kept trying, and she kept refusing. When she walked away to help the other woman in the kitchen, I put 2 20s under my plate, hoping it was enough for the food and a generous tip. It was the only cash I had on me. Boyfriend only had a few small bills. We thanked her again as she saw us off. We looked back while she was doing up and turning off the neon so we could memorize the place to come back on our way back. We felt so full and happy. Not sleepy though, and we made the rest of the trip no problem. Fast forward a week and a half later, we tried to find the exit from the freeway. It took me a few turnarounds, but I found it. We were kicking ourselves for not taking a moment to write down the street name or exit number. The neighborhood looked familiar in the daylight, except we couldn't pinpoint the house. Finally, we pulled over where we thought it was and asked inside another house with a consignment-type clothing business in their living room. The lady there was very nice. She was confused by what we were saying at first until we started to describe who we thought was the owner. The lady started to smile and said, "You met Rosie. She likes to help people." She went on to explain we won't find the house because it's not there. That sometimes it's a house and sometimes a store, but it's always Rosie and sometimes other silent but happy helpers. She said we should feel lucky because Rosie doesn't show up for everyone needing help. Boyfriend was convinced Rosie helped us because he needed it at the time. I tried to search online off and on over the years, but I can't find similar stories or history of a Rosie ghost/spirit in that area. I didn't ask how long that had been going on, so I don't know how old of a phenomenon Rosie is there. Maybe the clothing shop lady was pulling our leg, telling tourists what she thinks they want to hear about New Orleans, or just wanted to move us along. We were at a physical place. We ate physical food. Rosie, or whoever she was a solid person we talked to and spent time with. I like to joke we ate fey food and now have a hidden contract/debt that will be randomly collected one day. That boyfriend unfortunately lost his battle to depression several years ago. I went to Cedar Key in the Gulf just off Florida when I was around 9 with family. I had just had my own experiences and wanted to talk to others about them. So I was sitting on the couch at some house restaurant when this woman sat down next to me. She's a local, so of course I need to ask her. Being unsupervised, I ask her about ghosts. She tells me she works at this place in town. Come by tomorrow, and she'll give us a tour and tell more ghost stories. She gets up, and I never see her again. She gave me the name, the streets, and a description of the place, so the next day I begged them to take me. We get there, and there's a fence around it. Take pics anyway. Somewhere I have a picture of me in front of this building. The local notices us looking kind of lost. I explain. The building has been condemned for 20+ years. Several people lost their lives in a flood caused by a severe hurricane. Also, when I was around 5, we went to the beach, and I was really excited to go in the pool. We get onto the pool deck, and I hear this noise. I look up, and the building next door is being built. Workmen in hard hats laying brick and mortar. There's a team of, 5 of them. Scaffolding everywhere. My childlike reasoning tells me that I need to get closer in order to see better. Child logic says I don't want to miss out on swimming. I jump in and start poorly doggy paddling without my floaties or anything. My gaze remains fixed on the men despite my sinking, and it's only when I find myself gasping for air that I understand I'm not truly swimming. I wake up coughing up water after someone has dragged me out. The building is being built. Nope. It's another hotel that's been complete and open for over 5 years. Men are gone, stucco over the brick. building complete with at least 4 more stories. And that's how I almost drowned trying to watch the ghost workers who no one else saw. Around 10 years ago in college, I and some students built an English learning club, and at the time we were 8 people and wanted to recruit more. We got another 26 students, so in total there were 32 people. The 8 people, including me, held a recreational event at a medium-sized guest house, around which was a forestry area with tall trees and near a mountain, and the distance to another house was quite far. We held the event on day 1 until around 11 p.m., and then the 26 new members went to sleep while we, the main committee, evaluated how day 1 was going. For the evaluation, we went to a room in which, to get there, you need to walk straight down a hallway, and then it stops at a wall, the door of the room to your right. The room is quite big, and we talk, laugh, and then start the meeting. I was the closest to the door and stood maybe 3 to 4 meters away from it while the others were sitting on the floor in chairs, and some were also standing. It was very quiet in the middle of the night around 00:00. You could clearly hear the wind howling and hitting the roofs in the building. When we were talking for about 20 minutes, suddenly we heard a knocking sound on the door, about 3 knocks, and all of us immediately stopped our talk and turned our heads to look at the door. We were looking and whispering to each other for maybe 15 to 20 seconds, and then one of us shouted, "Who's there?" Immediately, the knocking started again, but now louder and faster. As we think this might be some of the new members doing us a prank, I and a friend run to the door and open it. And no one is there. No sight or sound of anyone. Mind you that the hallway was long, and it was impossible for someone to run out of sight. Also, the time between the knock and when we opened the door was very fast. We were creeped out and tried to finish the meeting fast and then take a rest. We never got the proper answer for it, and for me it was the most unexplainable so far. Little brother's paranormal sightings. My little brother has always claimed to have seen a weird black figure on walls or looking at him through windows or even running across our yard since he was like 4. All of these sightings started happening back when we used to live in an old house from like the 50s up in Ohio, and under this house were 2 old and abandoned wells, which, from what I've heard, wells are supposedly a portal/gateway to the other side, but my little brother always loved to go hide and play in this blocked off room where one of the old wells was, and ever since we had lived at that house, he's been talking about, and I quote, a spiky, fully black figure with big, white, glowing eyes with elongated fingers and no mouth. And we haven't lived at that house in, like, 7 to 8 years, but the reason I am bringing this stuff up after such a long time is because we are living at some family's house and have to share a bedroom tonight, but me and him aren't very close, so we start talking about life, and he starts telling me about this thing, the spiky black figure with big white glowing eyes, that was looking at him in class one day and only he could see it, and I'm interested, so I ask him more about it, and he starts telling me that it's been around for as long as he can remember, so I start thinking he could have some sort of schizophrenia, but he's never shown any signs of it ever in his life, so I push more, and he tells me, when it runs, it gets short and stubby, but when it's standing still, it gets taller and spikier, and he's always told us that he's seen black figures on the walls or a short, stubby black figure or a tall black figure staring at him since we lived at that house with the wells under it. This figure has also never spoken or reacted to my brother waving at him or looking back at him or any reaction, and my brother also said it's never done anything except for watch him. And with the way my brother explained it, he sees this figure very regularly and has for around the past 8 to 9 years. But my brother also stated he's never tried to talk to the figure, he'd always just let it be and watch him. I beta want some more info or something about this mysterious black spiky figure with big white glowing eyes. Is it some sort of spirit guiding and watching him throughout his life? Did he get bound to a spirit trying to pass over from the wells at the old house in Ohio? Is it a demon wanting to harm him or others, or is it all purely in his head? Strange encounter at Great Wolf Lodge at night. My family and I had a weird night at the Great Wolf Lodge and wanted to check if anyone else had a similar encounter at this place. We've stayed here 3 times before with no problems ever, but this was the first time anything like this has ever happened before. We stayed at the Great Wolf Lodge and had a suite room. The suite includes 2 conjoining rooms, each with a door that can be locked from either side. The kids slept in the room designed for them, which had bunk beds, while we occupied the room that was not intended for children. We kept the doors open for both sides, and I made sure the doors for both rooms were fully locked, including the lock where you can't fully open the door from outside. At midnight my son, 6 years old, ran into our room half awake next to our bed and was crying half asleep sitting up right next to us. I asked him if he had a bad dream, and he said, "No, I really saw something scary in the room. It was a big kid with a dark shadow walking around. I ran right past him to get here. I knew I'd check the room before we went to sleep and figured it was his imagination, and we went back to sleep. Then at 3 a.m. my wife sat up frantically looking around, and I asked, "What's the matter?" She said someone yelled "Mom." "You honestly didn't hear that?" I told her no, I didn't, and then she asked me to go check on our daughter. I got to the kids' bunk bed den in the next room and found her out of bed, bundled up in the corner, hyperventilating and full of tears. I swooped her up, and she started saying, "Be careful, Dad. He's still in here." I ran her back to our room and laid her on our bed with my wife and started searching the whole place. I turned all the lights on and checked literally everywhere, and there was no one. The doors were untouched, locks still in place, and windows unable to open. Honestly, I was feeling the walls and mirror, looking for hidden doors. I asked my daughter what she saw, and she said she was lying on the top bunk and thought at first it was me walking towards their bunk bed, but as I got closer, she realized it wasn't me. She said this person was taller and skinnier than me. It also had smooth white skin and a neck longer than a normal person's. Its skin was paper white and smooth and looked naked but wasn't naked. It didn't appear to have many facial features. I asked if maybe it was a blanket, and she said no, its skin was smooth without wrinkles, and it walked straight up to me, and I covered myself. Then I watched it walk towards the door where your room is. I came down from the bunk when it walked away and peeked out the den window but saw it still walking towards your room. So I hid in the corner. You found me, and I tried to stay quiet so it wouldn't hear me because I thought it would kill me. But I started panicking and couldn't breathe while trying to be quiet. I was thinking of running out the front door into the hallway. My wife asked our daughter if she was trying to be quiet. "Why did she yell, Mom?" Our daughter said, "No, I never said anything because I didn't want the creature to hear me and kill me." I didn't even hear our daughter say anything besides her hyperventilating as I got close to the bunk beds. I told my daughter to not mention what she had seen to our son even after he tells us what he saw when he wakes up. I know he would be spooked if he found out his sister had a similar encounter a few hours after him. Both of our kids have consistently slept in their own rooms since they were little and have never run into our room in the middle of the night unless our son had a rare bathroom accident. At this point we figured the kids' room was sketchy, so we kept them with us and then closed and locked our room from that room. It took an hour for my wife to fall back asleep. I was honestly spooked by this whole thing, so I left the hallway light on and figured I'd just keep watch and stay awake till daylight. After she fell back asleep, the closet light I left on turned off and wouldn't let me turn it on, so I turned the bathroom light on. A little later I heard loud knocking on the conjoining room door I had locked. I honestly got goosebumps and tried to convince myself it was coming from the front door but knew it was from the conjoining door. I debated whether to ignore it or check. I felt vulnerable lying down without checking, so I went and checked, and there was nothing, just an empty room luckily still with the lights on. Half an hour later, my wife, still asleep, started freaking out in her sleep. She appeared to be having a night terror, which she has had before, 1 to 2 times per year in the past. I woke her up, and she was frantic. She stood up and said she dreamt she woke up from a dream in the same bed. She went to the bathroom in our room, came out, and ended up being stuck in the other room, locked in with the evil entity. She said I had her locked in the other room, and she was knocking like crazy in her dream trying to get back in on our side before the entity got her. Later in the morning our son woke up, and we asked him to describe what he saw. He said he saw what looked like the shape of a big, tall kid with a long neck that was white/gray in color and had a scary, big, dark shadow walking around the room. He said it was making weird noises, like it was speaking words he didn't understand. He said it walked right up to him in the bed and had big eyes that glowed like our cat's eyes look in the dark. As the sun came out, we got the courage to go into the other room and grab our belongings to leave. The last weird thing is that the room had a weird smell, which wasn't there the day prior. It had smelled like a weird incense was lit. It kind of reminded me of those stick incense that were popular back in the 90s, so I didn't see this thing. But both of my kids, 6 and 9, saw the same thing 3 hours apart and gave similar descriptions of it without knowing what the other had described, even though they have never had an encounter like this. The only thing that differed in their description was my daughter said it appeared faceless, and my son said it had big, glowy eyes and was white/gray, not just white. However, my daughter covered herself when it got closer, and my son watched it approach. I did, however, witness both of my kids having similar encounters. 2. My wife woke up to someone yelling Mom. 3. The light turns off and does not turn back on. 4. Banging on the conjoining room door. 5. My wife had a night terror where she was locked in the other room banging on the door 30 minutes after I heard banging on the door. I've never really been a big believer in hauntings and paranormal stuff, but after this, I'm left questioning it in my head and find myself thinking about it all the time. Unexplained things. So I've been having really weird stuff happen to me over the past few years, and it stopped for a little bit, but it's happening again. During my high school years, I was extremely interested in the paranormal, so I purchased haunted dolls and attempted to communicate with the dead. All the time. During this time, I began having terrifying sleep paralysis. I also would have a weird, slime-like substance leaking down my mirror and TV in my bedroom every morning. There were a few times these huge, skinny handprints would be at the top of my mirror. They were way bigger than my hands. I would also hear banging on my walls randomly. My brother now has my old room and says all of that still happens. I moved out during college, and the strange occurrences stopped. A few months after living with my roommates, weird stuff started happening again. One night, while my roommate and I were walking upstairs at 2 a.m., we distinctly heard someone running up behind us. I began having the worst sleep paralysis I'd ever had before and couldn't sleep through the nights. I moved out after a year, and it all stopped. After about a year of being moved out from that apartment and back into my family's home, new bedroom, by the way, I started having sleep paralysis again and really weird dreams from dead loved ones giving me warnings about my friends and telling me I don't have much time left and I need to make things right with God. I wasn't religious at the time at all. It's been 2 years since that dream, and I am religious now. Anyways, I still was getting sleep paralysis here and there, but nothing like before. The last 2 nights when I walked down the hallway to my bedroom, it was almost as if a black shadow surrounded me and everything went dark, and I had the uneasiest feeling. The first night I booked it to my room, and that was the end of it, but last night 100% there was a shadow-shaped person at the end of my hallway. I don't know what any of this means, and I don't know if maybe it sounds like I need to be checked out mentally. Can someone please help? I feel like I've gone crazy the last couple of years, and I can't tell anyone because I know how insane I sound. Thank you for listening all of this if you did. Every night past 10 p.m., I keep feeling the sensation that someone is walking past behind me in the living room and hallway. Sometimes I feel a person sprinting towards the kitchen and hear small knocks, but nothing is knocked over, just the sensation of someone walking up to me from behind. The shivers I feel down my spine get more intense the closer it gets to me. One side of the house is always cold, and that side is where I felt the strongest sensation. This feeling happens whenever I sleep in the living room. Not in my room. But whenever I sleep in my room, I only feel the sensation of someone walking past the door. I tend to brush it off since I've been told that it was probably my anxiety acting up while being alone at night. But this experience started when I moved into the new house, not at the apartment. Not even in my childhood home. Then a few months later, as I was walking past the living room wall, I heard a whisper in my left ear, a vague voice of a male telling me to get out. I stood there and felt a drop. I didn't know how to react. I just stood there for, a few minutes trying to see if that sound would repeat again or if my ears were ringing. But nothing else was heard, only the pulse under my ears beating. Complete silence in the house, nobody was home, just me. You can't hear anything outside unless you leave the front window open. Another creepy thing is that sometimes my cat looks up and down at a blank space, as if someone were standing there. That got me more spooked out. I was a skeptic before, but after what I've experienced, I'm still at a stage of uncertainty and being spooked out. I know some things are real. Some are not. Some things may be exaggerated. But I know for sure, certainly, that I'm sane enough to understand what I've experienced so far. In the late 90s I went on a school trip to the Isle of Wight. We were staying in an old white building with a dorm for girls and one for boys, and we did a few activities like archery and a blindfolded woodland obstacle course, that general vibe. I remember so clearly the layout of the dorm room we were in, the red metal bunk beds they had set up, the size of the room, where my classmates were sleeping, the dim, overly yellow lights in the narrow halls, all of it. I was in the top bunk of the bed closest to the door, so as you walked in the room and looked left, I was up there, and my best friend at the time had taken the one below. There was a large, low window in the room, about the length of the bunk beds we were in or just shy. It was on the wall opposite my bed, so if I were to sit up, it was right ahead of me in my line of sight, along with a bunk bed to the right. The girl in the bottom bunk was asleep already. You're likely hoping I saw something viscerally frightening out of this window, but I'm afraid it's not quite that exciting, as our room light was on, so it was pitch black outside, and we could see nothing but our own reflections. The window was shut, it had two taller, thinner areas on either side that could open, but the wider central area could not. My bestie and I were on my top bunk, side by side, me on the left closer to the wall and her to the right, by the door. We were reading the Beano annuals I had brought with me and littered the bottom of the bed with, and there was general chatter in the room, as you would expect from a girl's dorm not long before lights out. And then it went quiet. Now, I couldn't tell you if it really did fall silent for a moment in some oddly coordinated lapse in each separate conversation or if I just suddenly ceased to perceive all outside sound in that moment, but I felt wrong. All the hair on my neck stood up, and I felt, for the first time in my young life, the strongest fight or flight urge. That sudden, quiet, primal knowledge that you are in danger. And automatically my head snapped upwards, and I looked at the window. In my periphery I saw my bunkmate do the exact same thing at the same time. And the curtains closed. Fast, and with purpose. Crinkles about halfway up as if hands were gripping them, making the sheer absence of any person glaringly obvious. A split second of abrupt movement and the slightest sway followed by an almost unearthly lack of movement in the fabric, given how hard they had been pulled shut. The quiet but sharp sound of the rings sliding along the metal was the only thing I could hear. All in just a moment, though the quiet beforehand felt like an eternity and our movements felt like slow motion. We looked at each other simultaneously, locking eyes. The energy that had been hanging suspended around us in that moment fell like a sudden sheet of rain as we realized we had both witnessed this together, and we screamed. The entire dorm was engulfed in chaos. A teacher, evidently in a tense situation in the lounge, rushed in. As our adrenaline began to fade, we frantically hurled words at him, attempting to express a more compelling message than just the curtains moved on their own. He tried to calm us down, claiming a girl nearby must have done it, the one who had been sleeping, or that someone outside did it. Impossible, but also not as comforting a thought as he probably intended, either. He claimed he would return, sleep on the floor, and turn off the lights that had been on the entire time before leaving. He never did come back, and we were left to read our annuals and exchange glances, hold hands, and shiver until our eyes wouldn't stay open any longer. And that's my Isle of Wight experience. Not my first or last experience, but despite the simplicity and underwhelming reveal, it is probably the one that the primal creature within me remembers and thinks back on the most. Thanks for joining me if you listen to this. I appreciate finally putting it out there somewhere solid. I'm a huge fan of unsolved and missing person cases. I know a lot of people disappear for one reason or another, usually on their own accord or by someone else's hand, but some of them I learn about I can't help but wonder if there is a paranormal factor to them. I got this idea from missing 411 cases. Essentially, they're cases of missing people out in the wilderness, usually national parks, that just up and vanish and end up gone forever or deceased in a place that has been thoroughly searched a half dozen times over. I was talking to my girlfriend about it this morning, and I think that somehow ley lines have something to do with it. I think that there's an undiscovered magic or vibration to the earth that somehow puts out enough power to alter our current reality but not enough to, like, open a portal to a completely different planet or something. Sometimes I feel like it might just be possible for a person to go walking and meandering out in a national park but somehow step into the right spot at the right time and end up lost in that reality until they pass on and somehow end up back here in our current reality to be found, or just stay lost in that reality forever. The worst case scenario I can think of is they step into a ley line with enough juice in it that it actually teleports them to the middle of the ocean, and they end up drowning and becoming fish food. Does any of this make sense? What are your ideas on it? Strange case of geologist entering a tubular cave near Coppermine River, Canada, Arctic Circle. Coppermine River, fog portal. This is a miner who almost became a victim of a portal in the wilderness of Canada. He was hired to search for prospects and was assigned west of the Coppermine River near Burnt Creek. He entered a gully about 50 feet deep and saw strange things inside. One of them was a vertical, unmoving fog, which he entered. Background. In June 1968, as part of a larger group, my brother Alex and his partner, Boogie, Vaino Hymanen were hired by a Vancouver-based mining company to do prospecting from Yellowknife, NWT, to the Arctic Ocean. Alex and Boogie are not professional geologists and were hired to bang rocks, looking for ore deposits. The group set up the main camp at a large lake while Alex and Boogie were set up in a satellite camp approximately 10 miles away. The satellite camp did not have radio contact or helicopter service to the main camp. Apparently in those days 10 miles was not far enough away to warrant radio contact. If they had a need to replenish supplies, they had to walk to the main camp to get them, which was an all-day trek. Due to the isolation and the long daylight hours, they spent a great deal of each day prospecting. The only vices they each had with them were cigarettes for Boogie and smokeless tobacco for Alex. The gully. On August 31st, the day was clear with excellent visibility. Boogie headed south to prospect, while Alex headed north to prospect. In the early afternoon, Alex saw two humps to the northwest of his position. They appeared to have a shape like a half egg. They seemed out of place in relation to the surrounding area. Alex headed to the two humps to investigate. When he got there, he discovered the humps were two large rocks with smooth, rounded surfaces. They were about 8 to 10 feet tall with bases of 12 to 14 feet. The two humps were near the edge of a cliff. Off to his left there was a gouge in the cliff that was about 4 feet by 4 feet. The gouge went down to the bottom of the cliff to a flat gully. From his vantage point on top of the cliff, he could see what looked like a fog column, bank. It was very still with no movement. Alex went down the gorge to the gully below. A great deal of the gully bottom was covered with moss and lichen. He started to walk south down the gully with the fog column on his left. He then noticed what looked like a large pile of rocks off to his right, approximately 20 tons. After some digging, he found 6 or more of those rounded teardrop glass shapes and a lot of slag that you would find in an assay lab or a smelter, man-made. The fog. After investigating the smelted rocks, he walked toward the fog column. Slightly to his left, he noticed what appeared to be an old dead tree lying on the ground. He walked over to get a better look. It had a trunk that was about 18 to 20 inches in diameter, 56 to 63 in circumference, and about 8 feet long. The tree had no bark on it. There were so many roots at the base of the tree that the trunk was not touching the ground while lying there. The area was mostly rock and did not look like it could support a tree with such an extensive amount of roots. Leaving the tree, he walked toward the fog column. He could not find any evidence of moisture or a hole in the ground that may be venting an old underground mining shaft or tunnel. He decided to walk into the fog column. As he entered only a few steps, everything changed. He saw a grassy field that extended straight ahead for as far as he could see. At this point the grass was about 12 high. The further he went into the mist, the higher the grass got, about 36 tall, and it was a brown color. There was a wind blowing the grass in a direction away from him. His vision was limited from side to side, which made him even more cautious. He turned around and got out of the mist. He could not remember the color of the sky that was inside the mist. He thought it may have been gray but did remember that the grass was a brownish/beige color. He decided to go back into the fog to be sure of what he had just experienced and cautioned himself not to walk into the grass. He felt that walking into the grass would be dangerous but did not know why he felt that way. He re-entered the mist and went in a little further than he had the first time, and the grass was even higher, about 48, and his side-to-side vision got better. Far off to his right there was what looked like an oasis with medium-sized trees forming a circle and 2 palm trees growing in the center of the circle of trees. To his left was more grass as far as he could see. It was still a brown/beige color, and the sky was, as he thought, a pale gray color. The sky was clear and not overcast. The entities. Exiting the fog, he found himself on his hands and knees, looking down at the ground. He felt mentally fatigued. He looked up at the mist and saw 2 men looking at him. They were standing side by side at the edge of the fog and about 3 feet off the ground. They appeared to be about 6 feet tall plus, had long hair and long beards, and were salt and an amp, pepper colored, more salt colored. They appeared to be about 40 or so years old. They looked Caucasian, having facial features like ours, but we could not see any eyeballs. They looked like identical twins. They were wearing pale colored pants and robes that extended down midway between the knee and ankle and a belt around their middle. Both were wearing sandals. He looked back down at the ground and then back up at the 2 men in the mist. Now one is off to one side in the mist and behind the front man. The man in the front was still standing, while the man in the back seemed to be sitting on a chair that was not there. It was a lot more difficult to see him in the mist. The man in the back reminded him of the statue called the Thinker. Neither of them said anything, they only watched him. Alex said that at this point he was feeling quite shaken and decided to get back to camp. Strange unnatural sloping water. He went up the sloped bank to the west of where he was. He looked back at the fog, and the one man continued watching him until he was about halfway up the slope. At the top of the hill there was a body of water that was close to the edge of a cliff. He walked to his right to go around the base of the hill, then went partway down the hill going south. He noticed that he was close to his line of travel between camps. He could see small bodies of water on the top of the hill. He decided to go up the hill to investigate. The bodies of water were sloping down both sides of the hill. The surface of the water followed the slope. In other words, the surface of the water was at an angle, not flat. The water was contained by walls of grass. The grass was about 12 to 18 inches high by 4 inches wide and about 1/4 thick, shiny green in color, and had a waxy texture. The grass was holding the water in place. The water was very calm and about 3 feet from the edge of a 30-foot cliff, as shown in the diagram in figure 3. There was no debris floating in the water. My grandmother's house has always been haunted, if that is what this is. If you have any ideas on why this is happening as well as something I can do to make things better for her, please let me know. First, I'll give a little bit of history on my grandmother's house. It was built by my grandfather after my grandparents got married. The land was not plowed or cleared and was basically a forest before they built the house, and there is no record of anything ever being built there before their house. They bought the land from my grandfather's father, who bought it from his father. There has been one death inside the house, and it was after the experiences started happening. There have been a lot of very typical experiences in the houses. Multiple people have heard footsteps in the halls as well as doors opening and closing, things going missing and turning up in weird places, and weird knocks and bangs. A lot of these can be easily debunked, I understand that. There are a few weirder experiences, the weirdest being that when my parents first started dating in high school, my father would come to visit, and as soon as he would leave the house to go home, the whole house would begin to vibrate enough to knock things off the shelves. My grandparents were always non-believers. My grandmother recently has begun to believe because the activity has picked up, but my grandfather passed when I was a small child. My grandfather got annoyed with the house vibrating when my father would leave, so before he left one day, he shut all the water and electricity off in the house, thinking it was something explainable, but the house still vibrated. Nothing outside did, only the house. There is also a bedroom at the end of the hallway where everyone refuses to sleep because you get really intense nightmares in there. We have a big close family, and we do spend a lot of time at my grandmother's, so everyone who has stayed in that bedroom has experienced the nightmares. When my aunt and uncle had their first child, they stayed with my grandmother for a couple of months, and my aunt moved out because she was home alone with her baby and saw a man walk through the hallway, and she was so shaken up she refused to stay in the house any longer, along with all her other experiences. On 2 occasions items have come off the shelf and gone across the room over 10 feet and landed in my lap, while people have witnessed it. We tried to find a way to recreate this and have never been able to. When my grandmother talks on the phone about our family, like a specific member of the family, while she is talking about them, a picture of them will fall off the wall or the frame will fall forward. My grandmother never believed in ghosts or anything paranormal until recently. The last month or so the activity has picked up. She is woken in the night by a man shouting hello. My grandmother does foster care and has a baby in her care right now and has had her since she was 3 months old. She is now 8 months, and her toys have started to turn themselves on and play music when guests are over as well as in the night. Not just playing music, the switch coming on, and then a button being pressed. A few days ago when I was visiting her, we were in the living room, and we heard a bedroom door open and close and someone walk through the hallway, and we both went looking to see who could be in the house, but there was no one there. My grandmother has been uncomfortable with these experiences, and although no one has felt threatened or gotten hurt, I just want her to be comfortable in her own home. Do you know what this could be or why the activity has picked up? What about a way to calm things down for her? We live on a small island that is very rural, and I looked for people to come take a look at the house and give me advice on it, but I haven't been able to find anyone. Alright, everyone, I have a truly spooky and wild story to share. So back in the late 70s, my dad, God rest his soul, was drinking in a bar in Dublin, and Phil Lynott sat down beside him. Dad said he was a very sound chap, really nice to talk to, and stayed a while shooting the shit. It's a cool little story. Here's where it gets spooky. I remember I was about 18, it was around 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning. I was up all night gaming, so I headed down for a cup of tea and a smoke before I went to bed. I walk on down, and my mom is sitting at the kitchen table, so I sit down, and we have a chat, talking about random things, and for some reason, my dad meeting Phil in the late 70s came up. The conversation ended on me saying that it was such a cool experience for him to have and how Phil was a legend. Now we are sitting in silence just drinking tea when all of a sudden the cap of the bottle of milk hit the roof. You had to be there, it's hard to explain, but there is absolutely 100% that the cap came loose and shot into the air like a missile. It was so spooky we just looked at each other like, what the hell was that, and how did it happen? To this day, I believe that the ghost of Phil Lynott was responsible for the incident. This is a true story. A month ago in upstate CT, I was hiking the Appalachian Trail. I know, not technically Appalachia, but still. I kept hearing someone whispering in my ear, almost like a song but too hushed to hear any actual words. I kept stopping to ask my hiking buddies if they could hear what I was hearing, but they couldn't, despite my ability to hear it clearly as we walked the trail. The first encounter I ever had with a black mass was when I was about 14 and my brother was 12. We were in the kitchen, and to our right was a hallway with 2 bedrooms on each side at the end. I was bending over into the fridge when, in my peripheral vision, I saw what looked like a man taking a long step from one bedroom to the next. I didn't think twice about it, but my little brother said, "Did you just see that? Is there someone here?" We checked both bedrooms, and they were totally empty. I currently reside in a house that is even older, and my first memory of this place was spending early mornings sitting by the fireplace with my boyfriend, sipping coffee and having a good conversation. At the end of the house, we saw a man with high-waisted pants and a white shirt on walk straight into the wall at the end of a staircase. The scene was as clear as day. Looking into the property history, we found that the original front door was right at the bottom of the stairs, where we saw the man walk in. On another occasion, while I was alone upstairs, I heard a woman cooing softly and sweetly, as if she were talking to a baby. I walked a few steps down and could see in the reflection of a photo hung at the bottom of the stairs into the den, where my cat was lying on a rocking chair that was rocking, and I could still hear the woman. I ran down thinking a deranged woman was in my house, and as soon as I hit the bottom stair, the noises stopped, but the chair kept rocking. My cat was sleeping and purring almost as if whatever was there was petting him and rocking him to sleep like a little baby. I have many other stories, but these are the ones that stick out the most off the top of my head. A few of my weird encounters. This is my first time sharing here, so I apologize for any formatting or errors. I don't know if these fit here or not, but I felt I should share a few of my scary encounters. I was born on a Pacific island, and my people are very superstitious. As an FYI, I am a natural-born citizen of the USA. I have never been overly superstitious, but I have witnessed a few things I could never explain that all seemed or felt like the same entity. First story, I was a young kid, roughly 8 years old. I was at my grandparents' small house/farm. It was late at night, and I woke up to use the bathroom. I was relatively awake because I was sleeping on the floor. I tried the bathroom but found out my cousin was in there already, so I went outside to pee in the bushes. When I finished up, I started to head inside. That's when I saw it, a huge animal near where my grandparents' room would be in the concrete house. I was freaked out and went wide-eyed. It looked kind of like a wolf, but bigger. We are a small island, we don't have wolves. It turned, and when it saw me, it kind of just backed up until it was swallowed by the jungle. I was so freaked out and rushed back in. I didn't tell anyone because I thought it was just me being an over-imaginative kid. Second story, this one happened a few years later. I was about 13 years old this time. My mother and I had moved from the small island I was born on to the mainland of the USA. I had been living here for 2 years now. We moved because my mother met my stepfather online, and he paid for us to come so they could be together. Behind our house was an empty lot that housed an empty building and a well. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. What's with me having these encounters when I need to pee? I glanced out the window of my room, and that's when I saw it. Some kind of thing was standing in the field of the lot behind us. It stood on 2 legs for a bit before it got on all 4s and ran off. Again, it was some kind of huge beast, which is weird because I was in the middle of a sort of big town that didn't have wilderness near it. Especially not near my house, which has train tracks nearby it. Third story, again, a few years later. I was 16 years old this time. I had gotten off my first job at the time, a certain fast food place with golden arches. I didn't drive, so I biked everywhere I went. I was biking home after my shift, the sun was setting, and I had unlocked my bike before getting on it and heading off. Now this was also the time before cell phones were so advanced. The best I had was an old hand-me-down flip phone that my mother had given me. It was thankfully red, not pink, so I wasn't ashamed to have it. Saying this, my phone was only good for calling, as it didn't have a camera. I had turned a corner around some houses, a route I memorized to get home from work. Once I passed a house, I noticed it was there. I could see this huge black wolf-like creature walking down the street. I was freaked out and stopped my turn onto the street. I was so freaked as its head turned and looked at me. I felt my body shift into a state of automatic response. I turned back onto the street I had been going down and pedaled further down the road as fast as I could. I was so freaked out because I remembered the other events. Fourth story, I am now 20 years old and in the military. I had been deployed to Iraq and was stationed on a forward operating base, or FOB. I was never put on guard duty at night, thankfully, but that doesn't mean I haven't been out at night. I had gone out to get a snack from the dining facility, DFAC, so I put my body armor on and grabbed my M16 to head out. The DFAC was open 24 hours but didn't have normal food made outside of the normal meal hours, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., and 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Outside of those hours, they had these tasty rolls of tortilla, sliced meat, not sure what kind, and cheese. They were all individually wrapped in cling wrap, and you could grab as many as you liked. I had grabbed a few and a couple cans of Rippets, a type of energy drink, and headed back to my chew, essentially my room. I had been close to where my sleeping quarters are. When I got close to the entrance to them, I noticed something across the small road. It was the same creature as in my other stories. a huge black wolf-like creature that seemed to be staring at me. Frightened, I hurriedly made my way to the sleeping area and to chew. Fifth/final story, I was now 22 years old and still in the military. I was now stationed in South Korea this time. It is a lovely place, and I was loving it. This was years ago, so coronavirus was not a huge thing. In fact, it wasn't even known about yet. I would go around to the bars but avoided most for various reasons. I also would go off base for various events and for some fun, like karaoke places and those family grill places, with other soldiers. I had done some shopping off base in Seoul and was heading back to base. It was a train ride back to base, and I wasn't thinking about much. I was looking out the window, watching the countryside go by. I was in one of the carts in the back when we pulled up to a station. I could see outside the station and noticed something that sent shivers down my spine. It was there. That black wolf thing was a little ways away from the station, sitting and staring at the train. Despite feeling frightened upon seeing it, I managed to remain composed. It seemed no one else noticed it sitting there. It sat there and didn't move. It was at that moment I blinked, and it was gone. So far it has been 7 years since then. I have not seen it since, but I have noticed the feeling of being watched almost constantly. So far this thing has not tried to harm me, so I don't know if it is a guardian or a demon. Does anyone else have similar stories? Or do you know what this thing could be? I am not sure what it is, but I feel like I have some kind of supernatural canine stalker following me around. I haven't seen it, but I don't think it has left me alone. Ellen's story, abducted? When I was about 12, I saw my first UFO. It was a bright object in the sky that moved impossibly slowly, was impossibly large, and had a light rotating around it. I watched it for several minutes outside my home near an airfield, thinking it might just be a government aircraft. It was what happened the next day that had me shook. My parents had split up, and I was at my father's house, doing homework, when there was a hard knock at the door. I thought this was odd, since we did have a doorbell, but didn't think it that odd. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. There on the porch was a shadow of a man in a hat, like the Hat Man I would see a decade later, only on my porch, which should have been completely illuminated. This shadow stood absolutely still, and dread took over my soul. I backed away from the door as another, louder knock shook the entire front wall of my home. I was terrified. I stood in the middle of the living room, motionless, lightly sobbing until I was sure the thing had gone. When I was 16, my uncle took me and my cousin up to the mountains at night to watch the satellites. We were watching them go along the path when I saw one slightly askew. I watched it curiously when suddenly it seemed to jump and shoot off into space at a 45 degrees angle, leaving a trail of light behind it for a split second. My uncle and cousin swore I had seen a bug. There are no lightning bugs around here, and it was too far away. It was, by definition, a UFO. However, what frightens me the most is this: when I was approximately 15 to 16 years old, I resided in a tri-level home. My bedroom, located on the second floor in the front, featured a large picture window. My mom's room was on the same level in the back with a sliding glass door that led out to the back. On several nights, the same thing occurred. I'd be lying in bed, sleepless. I have had chronic sleep problems since I was 5, or just woken up, and I'd see a bright light at my window. Not below it, not above it, but right at it. I'd start to get up to see what the heck it could be, and the next thing I knew, I'd wake up in bed flat on my back, tucked in tightly. I never slept like that. My bed is a hazard trap of blankets and legs. I don't fall asleep quickly, nor do I sleep on my back, ever. Something was fishy. I told my mom about this, and she said it happened to her too, but at the back window. It was impossible. Not only that, but every time we talk about it, we get the feeling we're not supposed to be talking about it. Some of this is extended to today, and I wake up with bruises and strange sores at times on my body. So does she. It's incredibly unnerving to think we could be some of the taken ones. I have yet to recover any memories of said taking, or of being taken, but this situation is just all too strange. I've seen other UFOs, to be sure, such as a large, kiss-shaped blob down by the ridge that had blobs coming out of it, but I really don't feel like talking about it anymore. I'm getting the fear. Haunted Hotel by Yosemite National Park, California. A little background: I come from a Filipino background and heavily believe in the supernatural but hadn't experienced anything until now, my mid-20s. Also, this isn't the craziest story, so no apparitions or demons here, thank you, Lord. My family and I recently visited Yosemite National Park this past weekend for my late birthday celebration. I was with my two nephews and one of their partners, and we quickly booked anything conveniently close to the park that wasn't an Airbnb or cabin, considering we often do it and get fearful of being remotely on our own. Our first night coming into the Sierras, we stopped by Mariposa, a little town right before reaching our hotel in El Portal. Yes, Portal. I don't know if it was a mistake, but our first sight and stop was of this church that hovers over the town and is lit in the evening night. Upon approaching a place to park, we quickly realized there's a graveyard hidden by the hills behind the church. As we put our car windows down for air, a quiet evening suddenly rang with a faint graveyard bell ring that spooked us out. My nephew swore he saw something move, but we brushed it off and left the place. After grabbing some food in town, we passed by the historical Mariposa Hotel, which, to my curiosity, I ask my nephew to search whether or not it is haunted. He laughs. He forgets to search it. We go on with our night. We get to the hotel, the Yosemite View Lodge, and there are people there and lights. Phew. It was a rainy weekend, and coming to the lodge, we were the only car in the forest with heavy rain and pitch black darkness surrounding us. I prayed and asked that the originators of the land may excuse us or let us pass, knowing the power some place like Yosemite can hold. We get there safely. Our first stay was comfortable. This isn't trip reviews, but we had to pay for Wi-Fi considering there's no service by the Sierras. In hindsight, the only odd thing that happened the first night is that my sister, nephew's partner, was in the restroom for quite a while, and at one point it sounded like a loud crashing bang, as if she fell in the shower. Our second day was beautiful. Got to take the family around the main grounds for Half Dome and El Capitan, along with parking at Shoulders to visit the rivers, hug the trees, etc. After a long day of touring the park, we get back to the hotel to rest. By this time, it's about 6 p.m. and already dark. We figure it's best we stay in with the rain and possible snow. My nephew and his partner knock out, and now it's just my youngest nephew and I awake. Remember when I asked him to check if the hotel in Mariposa was haunted? So, since he hadn't Googled it, I had, and upon the first few results, I found the name of the same hotel that we were currently sitting in. Telling him all about it, we start reading a few reviews of other patrons who had stayed in our hotel and what they experienced. Coincidentally, we even have a paranormal TV show on the local TV set playing. After some time, he goes to the bathroom to get ready for bed and comes back to TikTok and his phone before sleep. He and I are dozing off doing our thing when suddenly, I hear the sound of an object or wood knocking close by. The moment I hear this sound, I see that under the TV, a drawer is pulled straight outwards and left open. Trying to be rational and calm, I ask my nephew if he 1, heard the sound, 2, saw WTF happened, and 3, pulled the drawer after using the bathroom. He hadn't. We didn't use any of the drawers for anything. We just look at each other in awe and huddle up a bit closer. While this was ultimately the most significant event in our reality, the next day we all discussed how we felt odd, strange, fatigued, and experienced various emotions from being in the room or at the park. At one point, my nephew felt as if someone was covering his mouth as he slept and suddenly awoke, just as another review on the internet had claimed. Another segment of the late night, my nephew claims he heard someone whisper for him to turn at the same time I had felt someone was in the room with us, and we both looked at each other simultaneously from opposite beds. I will definitely visit Yosemite again throughout my life because I believe there is something sacred, spiritual, and alive there that goes beyond the concept of scary ghosts. However, it is also important to mention this in case you want to stay in Yosemite and avoid seeing an apparition at your bedside. Although I read a few hotels in the area are just as, if not more, haunted than where we were. Oh. So many, actually. I do love topics that we can't quite explain with science, yet, and it is a little bit due to my experiences. I really want to know how this is possible, but I'll probably never find out. So, here are some experiences. 2 years ago, I moved into an old farm, which I share with 2 guys. We're located next to a graveyard, too, all cremation. The building is from 1895. We have 2 areas under one roof, the barn and the living building. My studio is actually the former main living room turned into a bedroom and a living room. My bedroom is next to the kitchen, and there used to be a door that they used to enter the living room from the kitchen. So, my bedroom has a non-functional door toward the kitchen. My bed is on the opposite side of the door, and when I'm in bed, the door is on the right. On the left is my functional door to the living room. Weird layout, but I placed a huge wardrobe against the right door. You can't see or use the door from the kitchen. One night, I lay down to sleep, and I had a nightlight on, but I saw a silhouette moving from the left door to the right. I thought I was dreaming, but it was so uncanny. The next one is a bit older. I was 15 or so at the time, and back then, in the area I used to live, landlords had issues renting spaces. Good times, it's the opposite these days. So, what they would do is to offer a month's rent free. My parents rented the place for 2 months free in exchange for cleaning it. The story was that an old woman lived there, and she died in the hospital and had no family, so either the landlord had to do it, or he could rent it furnished and have the new renters decide what to keep and what to take or so. I can't remember, I was too young for that. We had a pet, and once we moved in, my pet would act odd in certain spots, like the front door and in the bedroom, which was my room. My room had a door at the far right end and was I-shaped. I could never sleep. I would always feel watched from the door. It was like someone stared at me. My bedroom door led to a hallway, and I shaped it. One day, my parents began to mingle with the neighbors, and it turned out that our landlord lied, and she passed away at the main door of her flat, where my pet used to circle and act odd. And from that specific spot, you could see right into my room and to my bed. I don't know, but this house gave me the absolute creeps, and as I said, I could never sleep in that place. The last one I will share is an old house as well. It was turned into a B&B by a family friend, and I lived there when I was in my early 20s, and in exchange, I was kind of like the night porter. On Sundays, however, the entire place was empty. The B&B had 2 levels, and I lived on the first one in a room under the stairs. Spare me your HP references, haha, but it was an actual room with a window and plenty of space. Upstairs, a man hung himself ages ago. The family friend's late wife passed away in that house. When I left the room and turned left, I would enter a huge, long I-shaped hallway with at the end on the left-hand side a kitchen. Straight ahead was the shower. Well, next to my room, the stairs went up, and the lights were off on Sundays up there. Every time I passed that staircase, I felt watched. Also, when I took a shower. The portrait of the friend's ex-wife haunted me, but in a good way. Sometimes, I felt watched when I slept, and my TV would turn off at random between 1 and 3 a.m. every Sunday. I did not have it set that the TV turns off automatically. I would, at times, almost feel someone around me. Pretty odd experiences, and these are just 3 of a bunch. I am very into science, but I am also pagan. I kind of love the concept of ghosts and am not scared. I usually give those experiences names, and when I come home, or whenever else, I just greet my apparently invisible housemates. There are only 5 of us on this camping trip. We keep counting, 6. There were bright flashes of red in the sky. It's as if someone was waving around a flare light from space, faint but noticeable. We all made UFO jokes and laughed as we nailed our tents into the ground. I knew for sure that there were 5 of us. We have all been friends since early middle school, and we're celebrating our high school graduation with this getaway camping trip. The flashes of red must have stopped randomly as we made conversation while fixing up our tents. Dave managed to put his tent together the fastest and told us he was going to find some branches for the fire. I remember how he had worked with me at the local gas station last year. We used to do the night shift together, and it had made working at a desolate gas station much more fun than it was supposed to be. There was also Eric in the corner still reading his tent manual, fidgeting with his signature round glasses. I wasn't as close with Eric as I was with the others, but I still remember sitting with him in math class and copying his homework one time. Ava was also there talking with Sally, my cousin. Both had decided to team up and work on one tent at a time. I also have clear memories of them hanging around at school in our usual places. In fact, I even knew Ava's younger brother, as he used to beg to go with us wherever we went. I bring all this up because I'm sure that there were 5 of us, including me, and that I knew everyone in the group. So Dave had gone to get some branches as we pulled out some foldable chairs and set them up around the fire pit. I remember feeling uneasy as the sun set and darkness began to consume the forest. The shadows of trees elongated around us as the minutes ticked by. Eric went to get a flashlight from his bag while we wondered what was taking Dave so long. He appeared soon after, the harsh rustling sounds of the bushes signifying his return. We were all buried in our chairs at this point, covered by our jackets. The temperature had dropped quickly, and a slight breeze was beginning to pick up. "Geez, you guys weren't even bothered to pull out a chair for me," Dave said as he arranged all the branches in the pit. We had set up 5 chairs around the fire. I tried to rationalize the situation, but no matter how hard I focused, my head felt like it was underwater. I had perfect clarity up until that moment, but when I tried to focus on why 5 chairs were occupied when Dave hadn't sat down yet, my head seemed to just stop working as if something was reaching in and pulling out my thoughts. Instinctually, I felt even more uneasy now, and I had placed why. The entire forest fell silent. I looked around at the faces of the others and could tell that they had felt the same. Eric was fidgeting with his fingers, trying to scan around the group and spot the extra person, but it was futile. I scanned every face, each etched in worry and frowning in frustration except for. It's. Alright, I'll get the chair myself, Dave said, breaking the silence and somewhat alleviating the tension. I got up and offered to help him. He looked into my eyes and nodded knowingly. We headed away from the fire pit towards the tents, but I kept my eyes glued on our group. How many people are here? I whispered to Dave as he looked around and realized that we had indeed only packed 5 chairs. In fact, every person had brought with them their own chair. They were heavy to carry, and we wouldn't bring any extra needlessly. There's 5, right? I mean, there are 5 chairs, Dave replied. His voice wavered as he spoke. No, I just think maybe one of us forgot our chair, I said. My mind was struggling to address the issue head on and now sought rational excuses instead. I didn't quite feel in control of my thoughts. It felt like swimming in a dream, and if I tried to force myself to think about who the 6th person was, my head would begin to throb. Yeah, that sounds about right, actually, Dave said, relaxing and heading back to the group. When we walked back to the fire pit and circle of chairs, 2 chairs were empty. One for me and one for Dave. Everything was adding up now, even though we all agreed it wasn't before. Sally suggested we were all probably tired after the long hike to get here and probably just needed some sleep. She could have been right. We were all sleep deprived from waking up very early today to make it on time. Ava brought out the drinks. The whole 6-pack was emptied. We all moved closer to the crackling fire for warmth as we took sips from our cans and reminisced on memories of last year. Ava was in the middle of telling us about that one time she was home alone with weird things happening in her house when I got these sudden chills despite the pleasant warmth of the fire. What felt cozy and safe moments ago feels wrong now, all because I realized that there was a crucial detail I missed. Who started the fire? I asked, completely interrupting Ava in the middle of her story and breaking everyone else's immersion. Everyone looked momentarily annoyed until they realized they had no answer. Once again I scanned the faces staring back at me. All barely illuminated by the light from the fire. All familiar and pale from fear. Wasn't it you, Dave? Eric asked. Dave shook his head. I think the person standing behind Jenny did it, Sally said, looking over at me. I whipped my head around so quickly it hurt. My heart was pounding in my ears. There was nothing behind me except for the encompassing darkness of the woods. Staring at those tall, dark trees behind me made me feel exposed. I felt like a lost bird in a vast field. Wait, I don't know, Sally said. Her eyes had gone wide, and she was shaking visibly. She continued to look around frantically as Ava moved over to her, placing her hands on her shoulders and trying to calm her down. I think we should leave this place, Ava stuttered. Yeah, something just doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it, Dave said. But it's so dark out in the forest now, we'd probably get lost if we leave now. Someone else said. Yeah, I think we should stay the night and leave as soon as we can tomorrow, Eric agreed. I tried to protest but realized Eric was right. The woods harbored an oppressive darkness within which navigation would be nearly impossible. Let's not sleep in our separate tents just to be safe, Sally said. We all agreed. We only brought 1-person tents with us, but we could squeeze 2 if we tried. That way no one would be alone at night. Following this conversation, we all got up and made our pairs. I paired up with Dave and Sally, just as I always did with Ava. Eric kept complaining that he didn't have a pair, but we reassured him he did. He wouldn't accept it. I feel like at some point we all realized that there were only 5 of us, and suddenly we were all huddling up in the middle of the clearing. Why do we keep thinking there are 6 of us here? Eric asked. Sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. We had nearly left him all alone on his own under the assumption that there was another person. My stomach turned as I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to mentally recap everyone here. My head throbbed, but I kept pushing it. There's me, Dave, Eric, Ava, Sally, and... I was pointing at each of them as I said the name. I retched and emptied the contents of my stomach on the ground when I got past Sally. The left side of my head felt like there was a knife stuck in it. My vision was blurry. Dave held me up to stop me from collapsing, and we all wordlessly started to move towards the tents as someone put the fire out. Dave helped me into a tent while the 4 outside discussed what to do. I could only focus on snippets of the conversation as the excruciating pain beating against my skull came and went in waves. Sally had the brilliant idea of arranging 3 tents together so their openings faced together at right angles in a sort of U shape so we could sleep as close as possible and also limit the entrance to our tents. Dave was about to go to help as they worked outside, but I clutched his hand and asked him to stay with me. The tents took some time to arrange. I started to feel a bit better once everyone got settled into their tents. A quick head count confirmed there were 5 of us. Eric was more comfortable sleeping alone in his tent since they were all close together. Looking back now, I think he was just trying to put a brave face on for us. I regret that moment deeply, letting him sleep in his tent alone. He was always less integrated in our group and knew that none of us would pair with him. Just before going to bed, we all agreed to leave as soon as the sun rose in the morning. I remember taking one last look outside the tent into the forest before trying to fall asleep. The wind had picked up, and the tree branches were swaying gently. Beyond our clearing was just pure darkness. It felt like the trees were closing in on me. With the faint moonlight illuminating our clearing, I turned my head to look over at the 2 tents we had left out and saw someone standing next to them. Despite the circumstances, sleep came quickly and easily. Ava's shrill scream woke me up in the middle of the night. Dave and I ripped our tent door open to find Sally and Ava looking into Eric's tent. We pushed them aside. Eric's sleeping bag was rolled up. He was still inside it. His head in the center, face contorted in utter agony. The rest of his body rolled around it with the blue fabric now dripping with dark blood. Dave zipped up the door of the tent. Ava was in shock. Her eyes had become glassy and unfocused. Sally was shaking her repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Dave picked up his torch and yelled at us to get up and run. We left the campsite behind and entered the trail we had come from. The 5 of us huddled together, Dave leading in the front as he cast his weak flashlight over the path so we could see it. All we had to help us get through this 2-hour trail was a small white circle of light. Even the moon failed to illuminate our surroundings through the dense foliage. Ava tripped and fell, twisting her ankle. We came to a stop. Someone said they knew how to splint it so we could keep going. They dragged her into the woods instead. It happened too quickly for any of us to process. Sally was about to run after Ava when Dave held her back. She struggled and managed to free herself, running into the trees to follow the echoes of Ava's screams. I was about to run after her, but Dave held me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "We need to get out of here, Jenny, please," he said. I hesitated but jolted into motion again when Sally's voice was cut off abruptly. She had been calling out Ava's name as she ran after her. Dave and I continued to run down the trail, trying to get to our car so we could get out of here. There was nothing we could do. At some point there were 3 of us running on the trail, Dave and I shoulder to shoulder while someone followed us closely behind. "Dave, who's behind us?" I gasped. My heart was threatening to burst through my ribcage, and my legs burned. He turned to look at me. Confusion transformed into fear on his face and then into rage. "You keep running," he told me as he produced a pocket knife from his pants. He handed me the car keys, which I nearly dropped. Then he turned around suddenly and jumped at whoever was behind us. I continued to run in fear as the sounds of a struggle grew behind me. I tripped and tumbled through the trail for what felt like hours. I didn't allow myself to stop. I almost cried when the trail ended and I walked out into the familiar car park. Not wasting a second, I ran to the car and started it up, accelerating out of that forest and onto the highway within mere seconds. My phone has finally regained service, and I've called 911 to try and explain the situation. I don't think they believe my version of events, but they sent a car my way regardless. As I wait, the sun is finally starting to rise. 2 scary/mystery stories. Story number 1. About a year ago, I was with my friend. I don't want to say her name for privacy reasons, but we'll call her Emma. Emma and I were going to the mall. I knew when we got there we would see some people that she knew, not that I knew, because I didn't open my circle much to other people enough to make new friends. I don't remember much from that day since it was a pretty long time ago, and I'm not friends with her anymore. The way we were getting there was by the city bus. She had had 2 $1 free bus pass cards for me and her. When she said that we were getting to the mall on the bus, my heart sort of dropped. I have no explanation why, I just had a weird feeling. My mom knew I was going to the mall, and so did Emma's, so they trusted us enough. My mom dropped me off at Emma's house. We were there for about half an hour while I was sitting on her couch, and she was getting unfinished chores done so her mom would give her money for the mall. We then walked over to the nearest bus stop, right across the street from where she lived. We waited a longer time than expected because we somehow didn't notice that we missed the bus. It had probably stopped at a bus stop a few blocks down. We waited there for another 30 minutes, but it felt more like an hour. It started to rain half of the time we were waiting there. We both decided to get under the bus stop place. It had 2 little benches and something to cover our heads. The moment we both sat down, we both got our butts wet, so we immediately got up. The bus finally arrived, and we were filled with joy until we got on and realized there were a lot of sketchy people, but one seemed to pop out the most. I was wearing a shirt that said NASA on it, It stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. You're maybe wondering why I just randomly said that. Well, this information will be important later on. Me and my friend sat a few seats away from this man. He looked a bit strange. I quickly realized a few minutes later that he had been staring at both of us. I whispered to my friend, "Don't stare right away," but the man who looks weird near us is staring right at us. He then, right after, said, "Hello, how are you two?" I noticed my friend was more scared and in some type of shock because she hadn't noticed before that he was staring at us, and I had just told her so. In that moment I felt like I was in some type of dream because I had read and heard true scary stories, and they always begin in this type of way. We both said in a kind of scary voice, "We're okay," in horrible and scary silence, and then a few minutes later he asked me if I knew what my shirt meant. I quietly said no. He then explained to me what it was. I said, "Oh wow, I didn't know that." Then my friend had gotten her phone out and texted me, "Our stop is soon, thank God." I replied, "Yeah, thank God." We got off, and the man got off too, and that's when I and my friend really got ticked off, and instead of being suspicious and whispering to one another, we got our phones out and texted each other a short and brief conversation. I was the first one to text and say, "The guy is right behind us, Emma. Should we run? Walk fast? Call 911? She replied, "We shouldn't run unless he gets any closer." Remember, he was half a block away from us. He then started walking in a sort of speed run. I and my friend were right behind the mall, which was close to the store Macy's. We started running, and the man sort of just stopped and walked back. We went into the store and talked about what had just happened for a few minutes and told the people that we ended up meeting with. I don't know about her, but my adrenaline was still pretty high. We were there for about an hour, around maybe 45 minutes in. I mostly forgot about what had happened to me and my friend. I had bought a smoothie and earrings. My friends bought a shirt, a hoodie, and a strawberry refresher. I got a call from my mom that she wanted to pick me up, and I was already pretty tired and really wanted to go home. My friend also decided to leave. She had to get on the city bus to get back home, and the situation with the man came back to me, and I could feel my heartbeat racing for some reason. We both walked out from where we came in, Macy's. We both joked about how the man would randomly pop up again. I seriously do not know why we did that. We were standing by a garbage bin that was right next to the exit and entrance of the door. We were both on our phones waiting for the bus and my mom to come. My friend was still next to me because of the situation that had happened, and we both knew that being in pairs was better than being alone. Then I got a call from my mom saying she was a few minutes away and to get my stuff and everything ready to go. My friend's bus was coming in around 5 minutes. We then both got off our phones and realized that there was that same man a few feet from us, sitting in between two bushes, staring at us. I thought he was homeless and maybe lived next to the mall, where there was a bathroom and food. He got up and started walking toward us in a very slow way, as if time made him go in slow motion or something. I then noticed my mom's car was coming towards me and my friend, and the man started walking away slowly and in slow motion. We were both really relieved. My friend Emma got into the car, and my mom was really confused. I then explained what happened, and she was more than happy to take her home. She and I spoke about it over text, but then we never spoke about it again. That was one of the worst things I have ever experienced, and I hope not to someday do so again. Story number 2. I was around 5 years old when this happened. It was a typical cold winter weekend night. I was a kind of annoying kid sometimes. I look back and love and appreciate my mom for having to deal with me as a kid. I was really bored, so I kept nagging my mom and kept asking her if she could take me to the store or to my cousin's house or somewhere fun. She said no because it was already night and dark outside, and I now look back and now know why she said that. She got really annoyed that she just told me to go ask my dad if he could take me and my brother and sister to the store. My brother is 1 year younger than me, and my sister is 3 years younger. They were sitting on the couch with my dad watching some TV. I then asked my dad if he would take me and my siblings to the store. He said no the first few times because he had agreed with my mom, but then he felt bad, so he ended up taking us. I and my siblings all got our rain clothes on, raincoats and rain boots. I'm pretty sure my dad got out before me and my siblings because when we all got out of the house to get into the car, it was already parked. We were halfway to the car, and my dad yelled, "Oh! I forgot the car keys and my wallet." He then asked me if I could take my siblings to the car and put their seatbelts on and then mine. We all got into the car, and my sister was sitting on the seat behind the driver's seat with her seatbelt on, so she couldn't see the driver's seat like me and my brother. So my brother and I were both halfway standing up. Since we were both a bit taller than the car was, our heads were slightly down and touching the top of the car. I noticed my brother turned around, and I looked at the driver's seat for a good period of time. I noticed a blue glowing floating thing was sitting there. It scared me at first, but it looked like one of the little blue things that the brave Disney princess was stepping on in the movie. I was 5, so I thought it was so cool that I encountered one. Right when I saw the blue light, everything sort of felt dizzy, like it was spinning, but I could still see the seat and the blue thing on it so clearly, and it drove around my house a few times. I then asked my brother if he saw that too, and I think he ignored me, but then we both saw my dad come out. We both sat down, but I don't remember where me and him sat exactly. I whispered to him and remember him kind of brushing it off. He mumbled something, but I don't remember, and I couldn't hear well. Everything sort of felt dizzy after seeing the blue thing. We got to the store, got our candy, and left. We were all getting out of the car, and for a moment I had the urge to tell my mom and dad, but I didn't end up doing so. I was too scared they wouldn't believe what I had just seen, and I thought if I told my brother and he didn't also see it, he would make fun of me. A few years later, I'm around the age of 8 or 10. I remember that memory and thought maybe it was a dream at first, but I told myself it felt way too real and vivid to have been one. I told my brother about it 2 times. The first time, I was really scared for some reason. I built up the courage to tell him, and he said that he did remember, but he kind of ignored the rest, and I just left him alone. Then a few months later or 1 to 2 years later, I remembered that memory, and having already told him once, I told him again, and he explained it more, and he didn't brush it off anymore. He said he also saw the blue floating thing and that he thought he was the only one that saw it. I told him about it going in circles around my apartments. He said he also remembered that. I felt like he lied about that part because he stopped making eye contact, turned around, and went quiet. Perhaps he felt guilty or had another reason for his response. I then told him again a few minutes ago, and he explained it more and was way more open about it and said he saw a blue floating flame thing, but that he didn't see the car go around the house, but I did. I didn't ask my sister because she couldn't see anything from where she was sitting, as I've mentioned before. It still gives me chills to this day just thinking or talking about it. I'm very happy that my brother finally decided to be way more open about what happened and was really honest about everything. I now know that what happened was seen by 2 people and must, in fact, have been real.